sympathize, 'cause I know just what you've been going through. To learn from your mistakes is so hard, but you know it's best for you. I didn't say it that way to tear you apart. I'm just someone who cares enough to help you with your new start. You can count on me to help you see that every side has another, every hero has a lover, every land has a sky above her, and if you want, you have me.
Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show, continuing our coverage of the PlayStation 5. We've now had a full week with it. I assume we've both beaten Spider-Man, right?
Yes, yeah, I think I beat Spider-Man like the day after the last podcast.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about Miles Morales with spoilers. I think, close to done with Demon's Souls, but I have been playing a shit ton of Demon's Souls.
Yes, I'm definitely not close to done, but I have played a lot of it.
So we will talk about Demon's Souls. And then at the end of today's show, we will also be doing our first check-in on Season 2 of The Mandalorian, which actually, Sean, you and I have been talking a lot about off the show because it's so good and we've wanted to talk about it. But I think we're going to talk about it now. There have been 4 episodes out of the 8 we are going to get this season. And they have been pretty tremendous. So I am excited to talk about this great Star Wars show, Sean.
Yeah, so we've got a loaded plate today for this podcast.
Jam-packed episode. I don't have any additional stuff because my stuff is the stuff we're talking about today. I don't know if you do, Sean.
No, I think the only other thing I've been doing is I have also continued to play Genshin Impact, which is one of the things about the PS5 that is nice is how quickly stuff loads. Even Genshin, that's not a native PS5 game, but they updated it so that it is taking advantage of some of that enhanced loading speed, that it is way easier for me to just be like, oh, I can play Genshin Impact for 10 minutes and do some of my daily stuff because there's a whole event going on in that game, and then load into Demon's Souls, and it takes maybe 1 minute to go from playing Genshin Impact to being in Demon's Souls, and it's fuck, dude, that's fast.
Maybe less. Demon's Souls loads stupid. I mean, they all do, but it's stupid how fast it is. Especially if you're...
most of that time is navigating the menu to get to Demon's Souls, not Demon's Souls loading.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're going to talk about all of that. This is our last week. We're going to be fully remote for a while because I am heading back to Colorado for the Thanksgiving break and then probably just staying through Christmas because I'm not going to be coming back and forth a bunch.
Yeah, there's no reason to if all your shit is remote.
All my shit is remote. Don't worry about my health. I am driving, so I will be safe. As long as I don't fall asleep and crash and die at the wheel. But hopefully from COVID I will be safe because I'll be in my car. So I'm doing that. That's Sean. Basically, I am doing this podcast. I will post this podcast. I will furiously pack, and then I will try to get to bed early so I can leave tomorrow. While this podcast is out, I will be on the road. So that because it is supposed to snow on Tuesday, so I'm trying to get out of Dodge. Yeah. But anyway, so that's all my stuff. Should we just jump into a couple of small pieces of news, Sean?
Yeah, what's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Well, there was one. These are both about superhero things. And the first is about Wonder Woman 1984, which we learned this week is going to be debuting on Christmas Day on both HBO Max, for anyone who has that service, and in theaters where theaters are open. So around the world, obviously some countries, theaters are fine. Some countries like the United States, the entire theatrical industry is dying because we cannot have theaters open, and our government is too inept to do anything like pay theaters to stay closed. So if you are near a theater that is safe, you can go see Wonder Woman. If you're in the United States, probably just stay home. It will be on HBO Max. This is by far and away the biggest movie to ever debut on a streaming service. The only other contender would be Mulan. But Mulan kind of came and went with a whimper because, one, Disney Plus did it in that weird way where you had to pay an extra $30. And Mulan was mired in a bunch of controversy based on just there was a lot. There was a lot going on with Mulan. I'm not going to recap all of it. So that one kind of was a dud. But like, I think Wonder Woman is one that people are universally excited for. That first movie was great. The trailers for this one have been fantastic. And, you know, this is a big gamble on the part of Warner Brothers because this would have been a $1 billion movie. This movie was budgeted and planned to make $1 billion theatrically. Now, what they're having to hope is that, like, where it can open in the rest of the world, maybe it makes some money, like parts of Japan and China. A lot of Asian countries are okay. Some parts of Europe, maybe it can open, and maybe it can recoup some of the costs there. But then in the U.S. and a lot of the Western world, hope that it drives so much attention to HBO Max that it is basically worth it as the most expensive promotional tool imaginable for their HBO Max streaming service. And it's an interesting strategy. It's a big moment. And, you know, I think, in my view, the future of theatrical has always been one day we would get to this point of simultaneous streaming and theatrical release. We're getting there much faster because of coronavirus. I don't have any idea if this will be a permanent thing, because if it doesn't do well and they don't make their money back, then no, it's not going to be a permanent thing. But if this is successful, I think the future of theaters, once they come back, could look more like this. And I'm very curious about that. And I think you even see, there was a statement the head of Warner Media made. He made a Medium post about this, explaining it. And he had some very carefully worded, like, marketing speak about how this was about, you know, consumer choice. And, like, if you want to go see it in the theater, you can. If you want to see it streaming, you can. And all I could see there was, like, this is the seeds of how they're going to pitch this for the inevitable future when this is just how movies come out.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because it is, like you said, Jonathan, it's been an ongoing topic on this podcast, is the deteriorating theater experience for film. And it has always felt like we were eventually heading towards this point where the industry either collapses or it has to find other means of making money and doing business. And yeah, it just feels like the COVID has accelerated that to this ridiculous degree where I would never have predicted that they would have done this with Wonder Woman. I was pretty surprised when that news dropped, especially because, as far as we can tell, like, the Mulan thing just didn't go well. So it's it's interesting that they're making this swing with Wonder Woman. And it's nice for me because I do want to watch that movie, but there's no way in hell I was going to go to a fucking movie theater to go see it in a month. Things are not going to be better in a month, right?
They will be worse. They will be much worse in a month. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, one, the Mulan example, like I said, has a bunch of extenuating circumstances for why it didn't do well. In part because it was not a very good movie, is like the basic thing. And Wonder Woman will probably be a very good movie and will have word of mouth. So, like, that's exciting. But also, like, if HBO Max had come roaring out of the gate earlier this year and was doing fine, they wouldn't be doing this. You know, it's because they had this confusing, weird, awful launch with no compelling original content. It's a good service for all of their back catalog, but, like, it didn't have anything. It didn't have The Mandalorian, which is, like, why Disney Plus got big right out of the gate, right? It didn't have anything like that. So, and it's confusing, and, like, until this week, you couldn't get it on any Amazon Fire TVs, and you still cannot get it on any Roku devices, which they need to fix that, because if this is still not on Roku when this comes out, then it's just going to fail, because Roku is where I feel like most people stream on smart TVs. It's like cornered that market. My parents, for instance, like, they have a little Roku puck in every room of the house that has a TV, and if it's not on Roku, it just doesn't exist to them. Like, it's I feel like Roku actually caters to, like, that audience of, like, older Americans who maybe have used, like, cable boxes before. So they need to figure that out, obviously, but this could be the thing that helps that service. So we'll see. Yeah, it's fascinating. There are some problems too. Like, HBO Max has no 4K streaming at the moment, and it doesn't seem like they're going to have that in time. And, like, I would be a little more psyched for this if I knew I could watch it in the quality, like, The Mandalorian comes out, where it's got, like, 4K Dolby Vision, and it's like, this is, like, better than theaters in some ways. And it won't be. It'll be a 1080p stream, which is not ideal. They should maybe make that service better. HBO has, like, the worst video streaming, and it just has since it launched as a streaming platform. But yeah, and again, I think the implications for the future are big. I think you're going to see a lot of movie studios, I think, are going to be waiting and seeing how this does. And if this is a hit for Warner Brothers, I think we could see more movies doing this. If it's a flop, they won't. And it's a big question for someone like Disney. Like, I think this doing well for Warner does not mean Disney would then put Black Widow on streaming, because Disney Plus is already successful, and they need to actually make the money on Black Widow. So there's a bunch of considerations. We'll see. But I am excited we know when we're going to get to see this movie, and it's not going to be on a big screen, but, it's still going to be good.
Yeah. No, I mean, like we've talked about, it is, in some ways, it's like a relief for me that's like, oh, I just don't have to bother with the bullshit theater thing and play like the theater roulette and be like, oh, is it going to go good this time? Is the video going to be bright enough? Is the audio going to be calibrated appropriately? Like, is anything stupid going to happen? Like, they don't put the fucking house lights down until like 10 minutes into the movie. Like, all the kind of like just horse shit, random stuff that happens because movie theaters don't care anymore. Just don't have to deal with it. It's like, if I want food, I can just have my own food. If I need to pause the movie to go to the bathroom, I can just do that. If I need to change the volume, I can just change the fucking volume and not have to deal with any of that. Like, there's a level of control you get over the experience that is comforting to me, certainly.
Definitely, and I do think if we are headed towards a future, and I do think this is really possible, a future where movies debut day and date streaming and theaters. And I think in that world, there are going to be, A, fewer theaters, and B, the theaters that are still there are going to have to invest in a better theatrical experience for exactly the reasons we're talking about. And I have long been baffled that, like, the comparable moment to this is the 1950s when television sets came out. And TV sets at the time were shitty little, like, 10-inch boxes in black and white that were not showing the same stuff that was in movie theaters, and yet it was still a competitor. It was still a thing that movie theaters were losing business over, and so they invented stuff like widescreen and Cinerama, and this is the first 3D boom, and like there was a concentrated effort to make theaters better to entice people back in. And that just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We got more gimmicks in the 2000s with the advent of streaming. We got 3D back again. We got some of the like D-box shit. But by and large, theaters just cut costs and got shittier. And it's very weird. It's very weird that was the strategy. And I wonder if that strategy changes. Sean, I forget if I've talked about this on the podcast. Have I told you guys my theory of what I think Disney should do in terms of theater stuff?
I don't think so.
So, okay. I don't know if this is a theory or just an idea. This is what I would do if I were in charge of Disney right now. I am not saying this is like the morally, business ethically right thing to do, but this is what I would do if I wanted to make a shit ton of money.
Okay.
AMC is the biggest theater chain in the United States. It has theaters in all 50 states. It's big. It's everywhere. If you live anywhere, you are in driving distance of an AMC, right? Mm-hmm. And AMC went bankrupt this summer. They stuck around, they got an influx of capital, but they are really struggling to keep their doors open, and they're not open because of the pandemic. If I were Disney, I would take some of the money I have in the Scrooge McDuck vault, and I would buy AMC. Just buy the chain. And now, as Disney, I have theaters in all 50 states. If you are not aware, the Paramount Decree, which was a Supreme Court decision from 1948, which made vertical integration of Hollywood illegal. Vertical integration is, in the early years of cinema, movie studios owned their own theaters. So like WB had WB theaters, and they only booked their movies. And there were other things like block booking was a big practice, where you would force a theater to take all of your movies. And this level of vertical integration was deemed anti-competitive because back then we had functioning courts. And it was deemed anti-competitive, and they broke it up. This was very undercovered because it happened in the middle of COVID and the election and everything, but the Paramount Decree was rescinded this year. Did you know that, Sean?
No, I did not know that.
No, it was rescinded in a Supreme Court decision. So vertical integration of Hollywood is fully legal. So if I were Disney, I would buy AMC because with one purchase, I get theaters in all 50 states. and I would rebrand them as Disney Plus Cinemas. And I would have a tier of Disney Plus, the streaming service, that would get you into a number of movies in the theaters every month. So let's say you pay $20 for Disney Plus, and you can also go see 5 movies in the theater. And they would program all their Disney movies. They would put the Marvel movies out, they would put the Star Wars movies out, all of that stuff. They would also have a regular recurring rotation of their catalog. So Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Pixar, Toy Story, all of that would be in some of the screens. And, hey, maybe they charge WB and not Fox, they own Fox. What are the others? Paramount. Maybe they charge some of the other companies to show their movies in that theater as well, but you don't get those with the Disney Plus tier. And all of the stuff that goes into their theaters also goes under their streaming service. So you can go see Black Widow in the theater, and if you want to watch it again that night, come home, it's on your streaming service. Why would Disney not do this?
I think they are, or something similar to that. Like if they can just fucking do it, because
they
it's
can.
Not illegal.
It's legal. It is fully legal.
Yeah, no. So we are just that like one step away from movies just becoming Disney's, and you go to the theater to go watch a Disney because we're fucked, because our society doesn't function on like a basic level.
Now, there is a chance we will have a new presidential... Well, it's not a chance. We will have a new presidential administration, and there is a chance that the Biden administration's Justice Department will be more anti-competitive, and so if Disney tried to do this, that might get shot down in a way their purchase of Fox was not. But even under Democratic administrations recently, there has been no real anti-competitive lawsuit kind of stuff. So I think this is... like, if I were Disney... this would be a slam dunk investment, right?
Yes, no, I mean, you're one step away from like monopolizing the entire movie business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you were the owner of Disney and had no moral scruples, which, billionaires don't, that's 100% what you would do.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I mean by like the future of movies. And I think the Paramount decree falling is a big reason why we're going to see more of this kind of stuff, because theaters effectively have no more negotiating leverage. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Other piece of news this week, also related to Disney, is this isn't really a piece of news, but it's a discussion I wanted to have because I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, Sean. We learned this week from The Hollywood Reporter that Black Panther 2 is going to be going forward with filming next summer. They're planning for summer 2021. They're going to start filming this. Very few details, like all of the cast is going to be there. They're saying Letitia Wright will have an expanded role as Shuri, T'Challa's little sister. But what was not addressed, of course, is the passing of Chadwick Boseman and what the plan is for Black Panther 2. And so, I was very curious, and I went through like the hashtag on Twitter, and I've talked before on this podcast how people have gotten increasingly allergic to recasting in the 2000s. Mm-hmm. And it's in full force because there were a lot of people saying like, if Disney recasts Black Panther, we burn it all down. It's an affront to Chadwick Boseman's memory. And I wanted to talk about this because I have kind of the exact opposite reaction. And I'm curious what you think about that. I feel like it maybe has been enough time since Chadwick Boseman passed that we can have this conversation of what do they do with the character T'Challa and Black Panther now that he's gone when they make more movies. And I'm curious what you think, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to recast it. I think they're going to probably have Shuri take over as Black Panther, which has precedence in the source material anyways. And I suspect that that's the route they're going to go, because I think you could recast him, but I don't think that the audience, broadly speaking, would accept it, right? So like from their point of view in terms of what they're making, I don't think that you can reasonably recast the character and expect the audience to go along with you. I just don't. I think I think it's specifically because it's Black Panther, I think it is hard because I think people have such a strong, with any of these like modern Marvel characters, they have such an intense fixation on both the actor and the character that I think trying to recast any of those characters would be very hard. I think specifically about Black Panther, I think they're opening up a can of worms if they tried to do that they are not going to want to do. Like, I think it's... Personally, I think it would be fine. Like, I would not, personally, I think, be too put off by it. But I do not think that they would ever do it. Yeah, I think, like, maybe they would in, like, 10 years or something, when we get, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe reboot or some bullshit, then they'll do it, but not in this continuity. I don't think they're going to.
So, yeah, and I disagree so strongly with, like here, I think you're right, Sean. I think they will not recast it, but I think that's the wrong choice. I feel like, because so what you were saying there is that you feel like the audience wouldn't go along with it. And my feeling is that this is a real chicken and the egg situation where, like, recasting has kind of fallen by the wayside in recent years. And I think what I mean by chicken and the egg is I don't know if it is that the audience stopped accepting the idea of recasting, or if movie studios decided they weren't doing it anymore, and so audiences were, like, weaned off of it. But, like, recasting is not a weird thing in film history. It's obviously not a weird thing in stage history. Like, the character is the character and the actor is something else, and it is possible to do recasting. And my feeling is that when I consider that, like, T'Challa just has to, that, like, in the public consciousness, in Disney's mind, he has to die with Chadwick Boseman, that is tragic to me. That is tragic to me, the idea that this character who, because of Chadwick Boseman's amazing work, became bigger than him as a person, that when he dies, you just have to put that character on the shelf and stop doing anything with him. And the foundation that you laid in that first movie and in the Avengers films, it's just done. We can't develop that character. We can't develop his relationships. We can't now see, like, what he would be like as king, which is, like, the obvious next step of the Black Panther story, that just you have to truncate his story and get him out of there. And that is very tragic to me, and it feels like a very limited version of imagination, where I feel like the respectful thing to do to the man's legacy would be to find another actor who could play it, and I do think there are other actors who could do it. It is, especially because he is, like, the first and only significant black superhero we've had in a major Hollywood movie, there are a lot of actors who have just never gotten to be considered for a black superhero part. And, like, I would be fascinated to see someone else's take on this character that could take what Chadwick Boseman did, build on it, and bring the character into the future. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I guess my view is that that's not disrespectful to Chadwick Boseman's legacy. It is more respectful, because what you do is you say the foundation he laid down gets to live beyond him. And I feel like the allergy to recasting that we have created is really weird and toxic to me. And, like, if it makes you, like, cut off avenues of your story, that's just weird to me. And I'm sure there's ways to do it and make it work, but, you know, they're inevitably going to have to do the weird he died off screen thing, and then the entire movie is going to be weirdly, like, more about that character and his legacy than it would be if you just recast it and let it kind of move on and live. And so I guess that's my feeling. And the idea of tying, especially for characters like this that were created before, like, these actors were born and will be there after all of them are gone, like, and have all been played by multiple actors at a certain point, or will be in the history of film, like, I think it's okay. And, like, we have all these recent examples of good recasting that, like, from before I feel like we got super allergic to it. Although a good example is, like, the Hulk. When they announced that they were not bringing Edward Norton back, I don't know if anyone remembers how much consternation there was on the internet. Like, there was a real school of thought that felt like the entire Marvel experiment had failed because they were not going to have their Hulk in the Avengers, and they had recast it. People forget this. That was the dominant view, that Marvel had, like, fucked up irrevocably because their whole idea was to make the four characters and then put them in a movie, and now they weren't going to do it. And then Mark Ruffalo turned out to be by far the best Hulk and Bruce Banner we've ever gotten in live action, and nobody even remembers Edward Norton played the part. This is a different circumstance, I recognize, but, like, it was a creative... Like, Like, what if they had chosen just like, well, the Edward Norton thing didn't work out, no more Hulk? That would be weird. That would be really fucking weird. And so that's just kind of my view on this. And, you know, maybe there is a way to do it great with Letitia Wright and Shuri. I also think, like, recasting Black Panther and having Shuri as Black Panther are not mutually exclusive things. You can do both. And you could do a Shuri spinoff if you wanted to. Like, they can make as much Black Panther stuff as they want. So anyway, that's my spiel. And I know this is, like, out of step with how people think now, but that's just kind of my view on things.
I mean, again, I don't personally disagree, but when I look at, like, when Insomniac replaced the character model, it's not even a different performance, because it's the same voice actor, the same motion capture data. They replaced the character model for Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man. They received, like, a targeted harassment campaign on the internet for that. It's like, I just feel like, like, people are so resistant to change and are so, like, heavily tied to and, like attaching, like, so much, like, personal identity to some of this kind of stuff. And I feel like Black Panther is, like, 50 steps above that in terms of, like, public awareness, the attachment specifically to Chadwick Boseman, that Chadwick Boseman, like, tragically passed away. I feel like people have such a strong attachment to it that I agree with you from, like, a narrative and like, storytelling perspective. There's nothing wrong with it at all. I think, like, Disney would be fucking up if they did it, and I don't think they're going to do it entirely from, like, a PR perspective. But I think it would be hard for the public to accept.
I don't think so. I think there would be the initial outcry from a certain segment, because that happens with every recast. I mean, you can, and this is what I mean. You have to lead. At a certain point, you have to lead the sheep to water. You have to lead on this, because, you know, every recast is followed by that. Like what I said, like when they recast the Hulk, outcry. Nobody remembers the outcry. Nobody remembers that there was controversy over that. When Dumbledore died in Harry Potter and they got Michael Gambon, there were a lot of people who were like, that's not Richard Harris, this sucks. Nobody remembers that. People like Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. When they the Game of Thrones recast that dude between seasons 3 and 4, no one remembers that Ed Skrein played that guy in season 3. They
I don't
just
even know
remember
who you're talking about.
I
watched that show like a year ago.
Daenerys's boy toy in Marine, the guy she was fucking. The head of her army.
I didn't even notice that they had changed. I mean, you know.
Yeah. There are other examples I could. James Bond. Every time they announce a new James Bond, people hate the new James Bond. Daniel Craig got death threats. Like they were like, because Daniel Craig is blonde and James Bond had never been blonde before. There was an outcry, and now he is the longest serving James Bond, and everybody loves Daniel Craig. And I think it will be difficult for Eon to recast that role, but they're going to have to do it. And when they do, people will outcry again, and then they'll get over it and they'll like it. So, like, that's my view, is that, like, yes, there will be the initial outcry, but also, like, if it's a good actor and people come to like them, then you know, you weather that for a little bit, and then people talk about it and go, man, you know, that's not Chadwick Boseman, but this actor did a beautiful job honoring that legacy and bringing it forward, and then it would be a positive. I'm 100% sure that if they cast it right, that would be the ultimate conversation once the movie is out, because that's how these things go.
Although if they cast it wrong, they would nuke the whole thing. Like,
but what has Marvel's casting is famously very good. Like, name a role they've miscast.
Edward Norton is the Hulk.
I don't know if
that
he was
movie
miscast.
Bad. He was not
that movie is bad. I don't know if it's his fault, but you're also talking about a movie that's we're going back to the very beginning with that one.
That's because I think that's part of where it is for me. With, like, a lot of those examples are older enough and are, like, have enough extenuating circumstances around them.
Yeah,
with, like, this one, I just, like, man, if I were Disney, I would just not want to fucking deal with it. It would just, like, the shit storm it would kick up on the internet would be terrifying.
But, like, I don't know. I'm going to say, here's what I'll say. If the Joe Biden campaign for president taught us anything, it's that what people say on the internet really doesn't fucking matter, and you should ignore it. That's what I'll say. Internet is not real life. I do not think not a single goddamn business decision on earth should be made based on what people say on Twitter. Not one.
I
me.
agree. That's not how they, we have like shows now just like change their fucking plot because people on Twitter figure it out before the twist happens.
I know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think, here's the thing. I trust Ryan Coogler. If Ryan Coogler has made a decision of that he thinks the best story to tell is one that writes T'Challa out, then he is correct, because it's his story, and he's going to do a great job with it. If Ryan Coogler feels like he needs to use T'Challa, and he wants to recast it, I think Disney should let him do whatever he wants. That's kind of my view, I guess, is it should ultimately be down to him. But, yeah. Anyway, we've talked about this for a while, but I just think it's an interesting conversation. Also, I wanted to mention Chadwick Boseman's last movie is going to be coming out on Netflix this December. And it got phenomenal reviews this week, and because it premiered for press, and I am very excited about that. So it's him and Viola Davis. So it's going to be extremely bittersweet, but one more chance to remember the guy. All right. Well, do you want to move on and talk about some PlayStation 5 stuff, Sean?
Yeah, let's talk about the PS5, that PS quintuple.
Well, we'll talk about the games in a second, but I mean, are there any additional feelings you've had just having another week with the console and the UI and the controller and all of that you want to kind of follow up on from last week's big First Impressions podcast?
It's very nice. I don't know, it all works really well.
Yep.
I definitely feel like I've gotten very comfortable with the UI. I always find it very there's a complaint about the UI. I always kind of roll my eyes at or find it weird. Is people being like, it takes too many button presses to turn it to the shutdown mode, and I'm like, it's the same. It's the same. It takes the same amount of time as it did on the PS4. You just do it a different way, and I just feel like everyone goes to that home screen and then they hold down the PS button, expecting it to bring up the menu to shut down the PS5 because that's what it did on the PS4, and that's not how you do it on the PS5. But when you get used to the different way you access it, it takes the same amount of time. And I just have I was just listening to a podcast earlier today that someone was complaining about that. I was like, no, it's not. You're just pressing the wrong button now because it's a different button. It's not slower. Please, you can get used to different UI configurations.
I mostly agree, Sean. I do think the way you have to do it, which is you open the screen, you arrow down, then you want to arrow left so you don't arrow through the whole list. I think it's weird and counterintuitive.
If you just press right, it just scrolls through the whole list in 1/10 of a second and stops at the end.
But do you understand why but you have to learn it in a weird way that I don't think you ever did on other consoles. It is in a place that feels once you get used to it, you get used to it. Getting used to it feels weirder than I think it does on the Xbox One or PS4. I will agree with that.
I don't know if I agree
I don't
with
think
that.
it's slower. I'm not saying it's slower, but I'm saying I think it on the Xbox One you just hold down the button and then you press A and that's it. You're done. On the PS4 it was largely the same thing. On this one it is bring up the menu with a short press, not a long press, arrow down, either hold right or press left once, then press X again. I understand if you are not super into the UI of it all, that it can be a little more counterintuitive. I do think it's a little weird where they placed it. I'm fine with it. I've gotten used to it, but
it feels a lot like when I used occasionally if I'm with my brother he has an Android phone and I don't have my phone on me. I'm like, hey, can I use your phone for something? And I'm like, I have no idea how to use this thing. It fucking sucks. It's no, it doesn't. I just haven't used it before. So it's it just sort of strikes me as a unwillingness to just sort of accept the device and use it the way that it's designed to be used. And it's the number of people complaining about it. Just it's not. It's totally fine. You just have to do the thing that the device is designed to do for. But that's not my main takeaway is just it's really nice to use. One feature I'm using more than I thought I would have. I talked about it last time. Is if you hold down the mute button on the controller, it mutes all the volume from the console, which is really nice when I'm playing Genshin Impact and I just unlocked a new character called Child, who's very, very cool. And I was playing the game and then wanted to look up a YouTube video to see what some stuff I can do with this character to, what's a good weapon to equip on him, all this kind of stuff. And so I had my laptop and I brought up the YouTube video and started playing it. And instead of having to fumble for my remote control to hit mute, I can just hold down that mute button and the volume of the game mutes, but I can still play it, so I don't have to go to the home screen. It's a lot of like little stuff like that as I'm using it more, I get more accustomed to like the little shortcuts and stuff you can do that are really nice.
Oh, definitely. It's an infinitely better UI than the PS4, and like one thing that I've just noticed is I just spend way less time in the UI than on like any other console, because like for one, I've had a couple of big games that I've been sinking my teeth into, but just like the time you have to spend in it to get to where you want to go it's just so frictionless. I've used that word a lot with the PS5. It just feels like it's removed a lot of the barriers. There are some weird things that they need to fix. I've talked about the HDR thing. I installed a bunch of more PS4 games this week, like smaller ones, and like they just look so bad with the HDR on because they're just not built for it, and like they need to figure out a toggle for that, because going into the system settings to fix that is terrible, and they need to fix that. When you go to install a game from your library, it doesn't tell you how big it is or how much room it will take. That's bad. They need to figure out something about that. Like when you hit download, it should like bring up and just say, hey, this will take up, like when you do it on Steam, and Steam tells you this will take up this much space. It just needs to do something like that, because it's weird that it doesn't. But other than that, like just those are little, very fixable things. There's no like big, unfixable, like inherent problem that I have found in using this system so far. There are some bugs. The like rest mode does not work perfectly with some games. Like I've come into Demon Souls a couple of times after rest mode, and it's just being weird. Like one time it was like stuttering a bunch, and I had to close the app and restart it. Which, not a big problem because it restarts in like 5 seconds. But, so there's a couple of like growing pain kind of bugs that you expect. But again, so many fewer than like this time in the PS4's lifespan. Yeah. So, or the PS3s or the 360s or whatever you want to name.
Yeah, one other thing I've noticed that I'm like curious and like very interested for like the future as they update the UI and add more functionality is I feel like the activity card thing is pretty versatile, because I started, after I beat Miles Morales, I wanted to just sort of swing around the city. And so something I did a little bit on the PS4, but it never felt particularly gracefully integrated, was to play Spotify through the PlayStation 4 while I was playing a game. And it works fine on the PS4, but it's like convoluted, and it like everything feels slow and sluggish in the way it does on the PS4. On the PS5, all that stuff ends up basically just integrating directly into the activity card interface. So if you bring up Spotify and you play Spotify through your console while you're playing a game, it then just basically creates a Spotify card in that list when you press the PS button that you can then open up and switch to a different playlist or change the volume. And it's like so fast and seamless. It's really cool, and it's that kind of thing of thinking about eventually I would really love for them to like do a similar thing with YouTube or in other video streaming services where they have the functionality, but it's only on like a select number of different kinds of things to snap videos to the side or put them video over video on your screen. And that's mostly only accessible through that like hints system that you can do, or if you go to individual games, you can do that with like, and I think you can probably do this if you go to like the Twitch thing or whatever, where you can see people who are streaming PlayStation games from their PlayStation. If you access it from there, because that's in the same area as the games, it then does a similar thing where it just puts it in an activity card. I would love for them to, and I'm sure they could do this, to have a thing where you can do that with any of your media apps as well, because I would love to be able to just put a different, like a longer YouTube video or something and put that in the corner while I'm playing. If it's like a Twitch stream or something like that, that does not have to be like this like select curated PlayStation only list. There's a lot of versatility I can see in that UI. I'm excited for them to eventually integrate, because the couple of ways that it does that now with like Spotify feels so slick and easy to use and fits really naturally into the overall UI like design language in a way that I think is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's cool stuff, and I hope they do. Like, I was playing, so I went back into Miles Morales after beating it just to kind of do a couple little trophies. Like, I hadn't done a 100x combo yet. And I was a little disappointed. I couldn't, once I had beaten the game, there were no more cards. Like, the cards to, like, go to a challenge, like, I had to just go into the game and find the challenge again. I wish there was, like, an archive of cards of, like, I want to do this again, because it would be cool to have that, because they just disappear once you've done it once, and then they're gone.
Yeah, I would love to be able to like pin certain cards and stuff like that. Like just have like one for like Demon Souls that just takes me straight to the Nexus, or to 1-3, which is my like farming spot, is the Tower Knight Archstone, and you turn around and like kill those two knights that are back there, and you just get like 2 Half Moon Grass. I would love to just like have that be an activity card that is just pinned there, because once you move on from an Archstone, it just will then go to whatever like the next point is in that level that you have,
Right.
and that becomes where that activity is. It would definitely be nice to have some more customization of that feature for the player.
The controller is still phenomenal. I love this controller. The one obvious weakness is the battery life. It's still not great. It's about on par with the DualShock 4's second revision. And it's fine. It'll get you through the day. It's just not on par with like any other controller on the market. And this controller, I am less perturbed by it in the DualSense than I was in the DualShock 4, because the DualSense is doing so much more stuff on board. I don't think it's doing so much stuff that battery life is fully justifiable versus the competition that has like, you put AA's in your Xbox One controller and it'll last 40 hours, like, or the Nintendo Switch Pro controller is 40 to 60 hours. The Joy-Con are 20 hours. It's still weirdly small, and I don't love that, but it's fine. It'll get you through the day. But like, if you were having to make the pro cons list of the DualSense, it's a very, very long pros list. That is the only con I've noticed so far.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, as far as I can tell, the battery life is very dependent on how much the game uses the controller features. Because from what I can tell, because I had like a scare the first night I played it where like, oh my god, I had charged this thing all the way up because I had plugged it in after I plugged in my PS5, and then I had to do a bunch of work, so I couldn't play it until like 7 o'clock. So it was like, this is definitely a fully charged controller, and it felt like after like 5 hours it was at the like blinking thing. But I think it's just because after that I have not, because I just charge it when I'm done with it for the day, I've never noticed it go below that second pip. So I don't know what the battery life is, but I'm pretty sure Astro's Playroom, because it uses the haptics and the adaptive triggers so intensely, and I'm pretty sure that is like draining the battery life more than like Demon's Souls and Spider-Man Miles Morales, which use that stuff, but it's not like, because I ran around in GPU jungle yesterday because I was like, I just want to play some Astro's Playroom. I was like, fuck, dude, that's right. This thing goes balls fucking crazy with this goddamn controller, and it's sick. But I'm pretty sure that it drains that battery life very fast.
Yeah, it's too bad. I don't know why they don't put bigger batteries in these things, but whatever.
Because as far as I know, it does have actually like a battery that is the equivalent of the Switch Pro battery. I'm not sure like because I remember reading the breakdown of the controller, and the battery was like the same quality battery that the Switch Pro controller uses. So I don't know like where and how like the battery gets used differently or drained more depending on like the touchpad and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely not that it's like a low quality battery that they use.
Okay, because that's what it was on the DualShock 4, right? It just was kind of a shitty battery.
That was a fairly shitty battery. This is like a very good battery in that controller.
Okay. And, one thing I will say also is it's USB-C now, so plugging it in is way easier. I know it's stupid. I know it's a little thing, but micro USB and mini USB are terrible and should be, the people who made those should be prosecuted at The Hague, because those are such terrible connections to plug things in with. USB-C is very easy. Again, not that important, but I do like it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm totally with you, because I think I only own one other thing that uses USB-C since I don't have a Switch. And I'm just like, man, it still feels very fresh to me. So every time I plug in the controller, it just feels nice. It's like, this is a really solid, clear, easy cable to plug in. So thank God, like, you can get fucked micro and mini USB.
All my controllers are USB-C now, because the Switch controllers are. The Xbox One controllers are not, but the Elite controller, which is what I mainly use, is USB-C. And then the PS5 controller. So all my main controllers are USB-C now. I very much like that.
Nice.
If only Apple would update the fucking iPhone to put USB-C in there. God damn it. That's like the last holdout for me. But anyway. All right. Let's talk Demon's Souls first, because I feel like that's less spoilery, and then we can spoil the story for Miles Morales. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Fucking goddamn hell, Sean. Demon's Souls is so good.
Yes, it is. It is very good. So where are you at? Like, how much have you done?
So I have done I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. I've done the first 2 levels of every Archstone, And then after you do those first 2 levels of each one, then for worlds 2 through 5, you get the archdemons, which is the final bosses of those worlds. And I've done 2 of the 4 archdemons. And I am open to doing the last big stretch of World 1, which is the longest world, but I haven't done that yet. So I need to do 2 more archdemons, and then the World 1, 3, and 4. And then that'll be, I think, most of the game. But I've so I think I've done most of the game.
Yes, no, yeah, because I mean that's basically the game is you have the 5 levels in World 1, the 3 levels in 2 through 5, and I think then there's a last thing. Because I never finished the game, but I watched it get played through after I played Dark Souls, because I was like, I'm probably never going to go back to Demon's Souls. Little did I know they'd make this remake. I was like, but I do want to see it, so I watched the live stream of it, and I'm pretty sure that is basically what the game is. Yeah, so you're quite a bit further than me. Like I've done levels. The first 3 levels in World 1, I've done the first 2 levels in World 2 and 3, which is Tower of Latria is 3, and then 4 and 5 I've only done the first area.
Okay, but you've done something from every world.
Oh, yeah.
Cool, then we can talk about all of them. It's just a great game, and it's a phenomenal game at its bones, and it is a phenomenal remake that Bluepoint has given us. And overall, it's just... I mean, what I've been thinking so much is that I feel like Demon's Souls has this legacy, and we've been guilty of saying this on the podcast too, of like, Dark Souls is the one that really is like the influential blah, 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 and Demon's Souls is like kind of the rough blueprint or rough draft or something. And I don't feel that way anymore. I think Demon's Souls should probably just be talked about more in its like proper place of like, it's the thing that kind of invented all of this. And certainly Dark Souls does have some of its own specific innovations, like the big interconnected world, that is more in kind of the Metroid Prime direction. But like so much of what makes the Miyazaki formula is in Demon's Souls, and it is not, to me, a like rough, unfinished version of it. It's pretty close to perfection in most places, and the rough edges that are there, I absolutely fucking adore because they're amazing.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit less hot on the game, mostly in that like I do see the places where the later games improve a lot. Like specifically, I think like a lot of the bosses feel fairly underwhelming to me. It's like, especially after like Bloodborne and Sekiro, which cater more to my like aggressive play style. You can feel them like trying to figure out exactly how to, and like I think this is true of some of the levels as well. Like how do you like construct this? Where and how should you put shortcuts? I had forgotten that Demon's Souls does not have any like mid-area bonfire equivalents. So it's like you have to do the whole area with for most of them is generally fine because you get a shortcut. There's a couple that's just like, oh fuck, okay, now I got to do this whole big run again. And so you can feel them sort of like figuring out some of those places. But the game overall is phenomenal. Like if you like Dark Souls, if you like Bloodborne, Dark Souls 2 or 3, Sekiro, it depends on what you like about Sekiro, whether or not you're going to like Demon's Souls. But it is definitely like, it is those games, and it is the thing that creates the blueprint, is the thing that creates the foundation that then gets repeatedly refined over the subsequent Miyazaki games.
Yeah,
it is absolutely phenomenal.
And I'm not saying there aren't things they change and refine. There absolutely are, and I agree mostly about the boss fights. It's actually one thing this remake does amazingly well is Bluepoint's new coat of paint has made even the more underwhelming bosses really cool because they are such aesthetic experiences. So that is nice. I agree. They're more in the Dark Souls 2 vein instead of the Dark Souls 1 vein for me. But I just think like my overall point though I think still stands of like I think Demon's Souls probably because fewer people played it just doesn't get its place in the conversation probably as much as it should, and I feel like that will be rectified now because like it's not like the rough draft of Dark Souls, it's much more the full bore progenitor of it, you know what I mean?
Yes, it is the first game in the series. It is not some like weird side thing that then they kind of like, oh, but now let's make it good with Dark Souls. Yeah, that is not what it is at all.
No, it's great. And honestly, some of the things that are different I really like because it is different. Like, so this game, the biggest difference between Demon's Souls and the other Souls games is the structure. And it's not just the hub world thing, because Dark Souls 2 goes back to that, but Dark Souls 2 doesn't do the, like, levels with no checkpoints thing. Because what Demon Souls does is you have your 5 archstones in the Nexus, and the Nexus is if you have not played it, it's sort of like the castle in Mario 64 or something. It is this hub world, and then you go into the different levels, and there are 5 archstones, and it's essentially segmented like levels to the point that the community just refers to everything as like 1-1, 1-2, 2-3, 2-1, that kind of thing, right? And each level within those archstones is its own little like Dark Souls world, you know? And it is this big area that is like this big puzzle you have to like unravel and learn your way through and get through. At the end of it is a boss. For most of them, you're going to unravel different shortcuts and make the route simpler for yourself. And then you're going to get a boss. And there's something about the way it is sort of like bite-sized Dark Souls in places that I really, really adore. I really actually like that structure, and I think in some levels it works better than others, but overall, the experience of like starting a new level and knowing that, okay, this is a fresh area for me to go through and master, and at the end of it, it will be like a self-contained thing that I have done, I really like about that. Overall, I probably do like the Dark Souls innovation of the big interconnected world even more, because you get a lot of that same sense of a hit, but it is less discontinuous, and I do like that. But the way Demon Souls does it, I really like it as an alternative, and we could spend a lot of time comparing this to Dark Souls 2, because I think Demon Souls explains all the ways why Dark Souls 2 is bad, and one of them is that Dark Souls 2 borrows the Demon Souls formula to a degree, but not enough. It's like weirdly trying to do both Demon Souls and Dark Souls, and it winds up as like this kind of just like, like it doesn't have any like of the actual hook of it. Demon Souls, like its formula feels like it's very confident in what this formula is, and it shifted it up for Dark Souls, but I do like this as an alternative quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it's Demon Souls, because of its structure, has a much more kind of like arcadey quality to it. The structure of it reminds me of like basically a Mega Man style game where you have your different areas and you can go to them in any order. Once you've done the first level in Boletaria and killed Phalanx, then you can go wherever you want. Like, generally speaking, you kind of want to do is sort of like a loop around them, because that's more or less the way the leveling works. Is like, worlds 4 and 5 are definitely harder than worlds 1 through 3, and then like the secondary in each one gets harder, and so it's like that's like the smoothest sort of progression in terms of your character level. But you don't have to do that. Like, you absolutely can just like say, fuck it, I'm just going to go balls out, and I really like the Tower of Latria, then you could just storm through the Tower of Latria and do that. And there's something about that like openness in the level based structure of it that, as you said, it's like it's very sort of defined where one level ends and then where one begins and then where one ends. And I think you're right that like the thing that Dark Souls 2 misses is that it kind of holds itself back from using either one as either structure as effectively as possible, because it's kind of trying to do both at the same time. It wants the seamless connectivity of Dark Souls while still having the like level variety and stuff of a Demon Souls, where it's like, here's like a very harsh break between I am in like swampland and now I'm in lava world, and there's just like a very harsh break between those points. And Demon Souls, by just having them be separate worlds, like you're just loading into world 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then each one has like the aesthetic evolves obviously as you go through it, but it has, generally speaking, this is what the Tower of Latria is like. This is what the Valley of Defilement is like. This is what the Shrine of Storms is like. And they're going to have similar kinds of enemies, similar sort of like traps and things like that. Like, every level in the Valley of Defilement is going to do some stuff with like poison and plague. And if you're playing on the PS3, the frame rate's going to be shit, because the frame rate's always shit in these swampy areas, and now that's all fixed. It's like you know that some of those things are going to be similar in those areas. And so Demon Souls, because it just commits to that all the way, it's really able to use that structure in a way that's really fun and exciting, and you can just very freely decide, I maybe have had enough of like the horror tone of the Tower of Latria. I want to do some of like what feels like slightly more action-y stuff, so maybe I'll go to like the lava world with like the Stonefang Tunnel and stuff like that. And you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do when you want to do it. And then Dark Souls 2, that has this like weird sort of disjointed feel, because none of the world actually kind of makes sense, because there is no way to go from swamp world to lava world directly and have that be a thing that like makes sense for the geography for the player. but you don't get the like freedom of the Demon Souls sort of hub structure that is as open as it is. And so Dark Souls 2 just is kind of like the worst of both worlds in some ways.
Yeah, and like even with the separated worlds, I feel like everything in Demon Souls still feels more of a piece than Dark Souls 2 did. And some of that, I will say, I don't know how much of that is Bluepoint like aesthetically making choices that help this, but like there is something about these 5 areas of Boletaria. I can imagine how these are 5 areas within one world, even if I am not seeing the links between them. Whereas Dark Souls 2, I literally can walk from one area to the next, and it just makes no goddamn sense. It's just like weird and disconnected, and it feels like different teams made different levels. And I know some people are big Dark Souls 2 fans. I don't understand you. That game, I am now on the point of like, I think that game just might be a bad game now that I've played Demon Souls. Because like it's so underwhelming. But yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. And just like the sheer like joy I feel, and like that it is joy. I should say it's not joy. It's like euphoria, because it is this euphoria of like, I am excited to see this new world. I am also scared of what I am going to encounter. It is like this mix of like high rushed emotions when I go into a new Archstone, like my initial run through and doing one of each, all 5. But then like even further than that of like, okay, now I'm going to do the next part of this Archstone, and that euphoria comes back. And I have not felt that in that dose since Dark Souls 1, the first time I played that. And like, because I don't think Dark Souls 2 gives it, and Sekiro is just a very different thing. Like, it's a euphoria of a totally different kind, because Sekiro is more of a homogenous world, and that is to its credit. That's what it's trying to do. But like, there's just something about that this is what the Souls games are, is like, it's like this big fucking combat geography puzzle laid out before you, and I am so excited to put all the pieces in place, no matter how hard it gets. And I don't think Demon Souls is as hard as Dark Souls overall to me. Yeah. Some of that is also I know how to play it, which I didn't when I started Dark Souls. So like the hardest Souls game will always be the first one you play, in a sense. But still, like the challenge, this one really defines for me how the challenge of the Souls games is fun. It is not punishing. It is punishing at times, but the punishment is fun. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the punishment of it is more that like, you have to start back at the Archstone, which depending on what the last shortcut you unlocked was, might be not a big deal, or it might be, well, fuck, that's going to be like 5 to 10 more minutes of me having to run through and figure out where the fuck I was. Like there was one where I got the only time I feel like I got annoyed at Demon Souls was falling down a pit in the Tower of Latria, and then starting back at the beginning and being like, I have no idea how the fuck to get back there, because it's so counterintuitive that there's no shortcut you unlock that stops you from having to go up from where you start. You always have to, you start on the 3rd floor, and you always have to go up to the 4th floor before you can go down. And it feels like there should be a shortcut you unlock that means you don't have to go up to go down. And it feels like that's one of those areas where I talk about like you can feel some of the rough edges in some of those designs where I think the team learned a little bit better where and how like some of the shortcuts make sense and how to kind of cut around edges. Because sometimes the shortcuts in Demon Souls feel almost like an accident, like the shortcut in World 2-2 that is basically you just go down a big hole. And it's like you kind of skip almost that whole world if you just go left instead of right and just very carefully fall down this big hole, and then you can go right to where the Flame Lurker is. And so like some of that stuff feels weird. There's also and I think some of the combat and stuff like that in Demon Souls definitely does not feel as challenging. I think partially because you can cheese things a lot easier, especially if I'm not using magic, but this game is kind of infamous for if you start as the Royal, you start with the Soul Arrow spell and a ring that recharges your mana. Because they use a mana system instead of a like number of spells cast before you go to a bonfire system, like magic in this game is like kind of infamously completely broken. And then the health system also, which is one of the only major things they modified for this remake, is that in the original Demon Souls, the grass did not contribute to your overall equipment load. So you could carry effectively infinite grass as much as you had found. And now they made it so that grass actually weighs something, which I think they mostly did that for PvP, because you could, in the old invasions, if people had enough grass and they had a strategy to be able to heal effectively, they would be immortal. And now they've said, no, let's make it so you can still carry a shit ton of healing items, like way more than any other of these games. Like, it's crazy how much you can heal, but there is a limit. Eventually you have to be like, this is more than enough grass that this man can stuff in his pockets.
Yes, exactly. The grass system is interesting because they brought that's another thing they brought back for Dark Souls 2 that, like, just didn't make sense to me in Dark Souls 2 because they still had the bonfire system, and the Estus Flask was such a, like, elegant way to do it. I like it in Demon Souls. I actually think it's an interesting, like, part of the overall challenge and kind of makes sense to me in this game. Because the Estus Flask wouldn't make nearly as much sense in this game because you're not going from bonfire to bonfire.
Yeah.
So I think it makes perfect sense in Demon Souls. In Dark Souls 2, you're still going from bonfire to bonfire, so the lack of the Estus Flask is bizarre in that game to me.
Yeah, I agree. There's something about... it is something that, like, actually probably playing through Demon Souls now and, like, understanding what Souls was, which that's, like, one of the main reasons why I fell off the game originally when I played it way back when, is that, like, it just didn't click. I just kind of didn't understand what the game was doing because I didn't have the context. And I think Dark Souls' structure is a little bit better at kind of inviting you into what the fuck this thing is. And I think having that, like, seamless world puts you in that sense of place a little bit better. But yeah, playing through Demon Souls, it is making me reflect on Dark Souls 2 in a way that I think I'm kind of where you're at, Jonathan, that, like, I think even though I've been very critical of Dark Souls 2, I think I've been, like, had been kind of gloves off with it. And this Demon Souls being what it is, and seeing that Dark Souls 2 was this, like, unsuccessful marriage of what the first two games, sort of, like, puts it in a worse light for me. But then it puts Demon Souls in a better light because it makes a lot of what it does feel more sort of fresh in the series, because there's just some stuff that Demon Souls does with that structure and with some of the way it deals with items and stuff like that none of the other games ever do. And I'm really glad that Bluepoint, because, I mean, Bluepoint, this is their methodology, so I would not have ever doubted they would do this. But I'm glad that Bluepoint is the team that got this remake, because they understood that you have to make the fundamental game the same. You can't go in and make it more like Dark Souls. Like, if they had put Estus Flasks into this game and tried to be like, well, that's what people are used to, and they like the Estus Flask system, so let's take that out of Dark Souls and put it into Demon Souls to try to, like, modernize it for the genre, it would have, like, broken the game. And so there's something really nice about being able to appreciate all the original design decisions while having some of the friction shaved off, mostly through just, like, sheer frame rate and the load times, because that to me is the biggest improvement of the game. And the thing that I think makes the structure of it work as good as it does here in this version is that you don't have, like, a minute plus long load every time you load into an Archstone, which is how Demon Souls on the PS3 worked. It was a, like, massive load anytime you went into one of those areas. And that, I think, hurt the sense of everything being contained ultimately in the country or the nation of Boletaria. And there is narrative connection between all these different places, which exists absolutely in the original game. But it's harder to feel that when everything is blocked by this harsh, like, paper brown screen that has, like, some vague lore bullshit written on it that you're like, I don't know what any of this means. And you're kind of just not looking at it or paying attention to it. In this remake, all that is just, here's this, like, 1 second transition that happens through this, like, fog animation. And so moving between the Nexus and the different areas is so smooth and seamless that I think it makes everything feel like it exists, broadly speaking, in the same structure, rather than it feeling like you're like, okay, time to shut down World 1, and now time to boot up World 2, which is what playing it on the PS3 kind of felt like.
I agree 100%, and it also just makes me want to engage with the game more.
Yeah.
Like, so for instance, there's this whole system where the blacksmith who can do all the cool stuff is in World 2. But a lot of the stuff you need to, like, get to go use with the blacksmith, you need to get in other worlds. So I imagine that would have been very frustrating in the original game, but in this game, like, I feel just so incentivized of, like, if I'm working with my blacksmith and I'm like, oh, I'm out of souls, well, I've got this farming spot over in 4-2 that I like to jump into, and so I will go back to the Nexus, go over to 4-2, I shoot the Reaper dude, I get my 5,000 souls that he drops, I run back to the Archstone, go back to the Nexus, go to World 2, go over to the blacksmith, and I've got the souls I need, and I keep moving. And, like, that sounds like it could be tedious, but what I just described, I can do in, like, under a minute flat, and that would probably have taken, like, 10 minutes with all the load times factored in on the PS3. I mean, this game, maybe even more than Miles Morales, I think is a real example of how transformative to the act of playing these load times are. Because Miles Morales, it's a nice convenience that there's no long load into the game, that there's no long load on quick play or quick travel, but it doesn't ultimately change how I play the game. Demon Souls, this changes how I play. I am getting more into the system of creating some of the final big weapons with the Demon Souls than I ever did in Dark Souls. Because it's just yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm having the exact same experience. And for me having because I do remember, because I know I'll never beat Demon Souls. I did play it for 10 to 15 hours. It wasn't just I got through World 1 or the first level and just I don't understand this. I beat the first area of every one of the worlds on the PS3 version and then kind of just petered off of it. So I remember looking up stuff, being how the fuck does this work? Okay, so you have to go to, but you can't use the blacksmith at the Nexus. There's the other blacksmith that's in the basement in Stonefang Tunnel. Okay, so if I want to make this cool bow with the lava bow or whatever, I have to go to him. Okay, and that process just being so obnoxious and feeling if I needed to pick up a couple thousand souls to upgrade my weapon or whatever, that just being well, I'm just not going to bother with it because it's going to take me so long to load into the Shrine of Storms or wherever. That I might as well just continue playing the game, and when I have those souls, I have those souls. And then that's what leads to the frustration of, in that instance, losing souls feels so frustrating because you end up back at the Archstone, you go back to the Nexus, and you still have nothing. And it's well, that weapon I wanted to upgrade, I still don't have the souls to upgrade because I just got killed. And I lost my souls or whatever. Whereas here, I spent probably 15 minutes last night. I was okay, time to take a stop. I don't have enough time to go through a new area, but I didn't want to stop playing the game, even though I know I should because I should just go to bed. And I just ended up playing. I thought I'll just 2 minutes. I'll really quickly level up my Uchigatana, and I upgraded it. And I was but I have almost enough materials to upgrade the next one. But if I get 500 more souls, then I can buy the large Sharpstone shard from that one dude in 4 or in 2-2. And so, I can just go, and I actually needed more grass anyways because I used up a lot up with the Flame Lurker. So let me load into the 1-3 and then go do my thing to get half more grass. And I just went on this whole chain, and I ended up with my bow getting 2 levels higher and my sword getting 2 levels higher. And now I have a sick dagger that does 2 times as much damage on a riposte as normal because I leveled up a special chain for that. And it's the kind of shit that I never did that in these games. And I've played all of them, and I've never kind of done it that way. And there's something about Demon Souls having the load times be the way they are. I'm having a lot more fun experimenting with my loadout and my character setup and different ways to upgrade weapons that, generally speaking, these games I just went, let me just do the normal thing and just kind of not pay attention to it because it's too much of a hassle to do. In Demon Souls, it's still cryptic, and you still have to kind of look up some of this shit to be what does Marrowstone do? How does this affect this weapon if I do this upgrade path? It's not transparent in that stuff. But actually doing the mechanical process of executing all of that feels so much more seamless now that I feel I'm not being prevented from doing it just for technical limitations on the system.
Exactly. Yeah, that's I talking about going on a big long chain. I do that all the time in this game where especially when I've finished a world, I've beaten a boss and I'm jazzed, but I still want to play. I don't want to start a whole new world because it's that's too much work, but I just want to play more Demon Souls.
Yeah.
I just find myself, I am just zipping around all the different worlds. I'm I'm going to go here to get this thing, and then I'm going to zip back here to the Nexus and grab a couple more arrows, and I'm going to zip over here, and it's just, zipping back and forth all over the place. And it's really fun, and it does make the world feel more connected. It does give it this Dark Souls feel of these places are all connected. I'm just getting there in a different way. And it feels like something in the original vision of the team in 2009 has been unearthed by taking away those load times, because I think all of that is in there. It was just kind of buried by technical restraints, and those are no longer there. And so it's super fun. And grinding, I've always enjoyed grinding in the Souls games because it is stupid and it is cheesy and there's just so many, clearly, there are places built into these games that are silly grinding places. And Demon Souls, they're like very transparent. There are a
Yeah.
couple where it's like, this exists to grind. And the thing is, though, in the past, between every run, you would take a minute or more to load, depending on what you're loading in between, right? But in this, it's just like, because my first big grinding run I started doing was the one you talked about, Sean, where you go get your Half Moon Grass from the two guys where the Tower Knight was. Then I had the one in 4-2 where you have the Reaper dude, and I do that one. And then there is one near the end where when you beat the Archdemon in World 5, there is a phenomenal farming location. And in all of these, it's like, the run I would be doing, like, it would have taken so much longer to, like, get this to work, I feel like. And in this, it's just touch the Archstone, we're back. Okay, because that fog door, it does not matter what you're loading. It is always about 2 seconds of fog animation and then you're back, you know?
Yeah.
Like, effectively, I don't think the game is even, like, taking time to load. I think the fog animation is just there so something is there, you know? It's like, it's an aesthetic thing. It's not just hiding a loading screen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it is, and it's the thing that I'm very excited to see what different games come up with to do that, you know, because there's something very elegant about Miles Morales' Fade to Black and Fade Back Up, which actually, that reminds me, I did buy Spider-Man Remastered because they patched the game that you can now upload your PS4 save to it. So it's like, oh, I might as well like run around in there, and that game handles it the same way. And I was like, fuck, dude, it's just so classy feeling to just have the game fade out and then fade back up, and you're just there in wherever location you're teleporting to. Then Demon Souls goes for something that's a little bit more like, yeah, aesthetically in line with the rest of the game. But there's something about playing Demon Souls, and especially going between playing Demon Souls and playing Genshin Impact, which, like I said, has very good load times because it did get a specific patch to take advantage of the PS5, but it's still not a PS5 native game, so it's not the same level of faster load times. And there is a very clear old gen, next gen divide, and for me, it's like the visuals of Demon Souls are like utterly fucking gorgeous, and we can talk about that with some of the areas and how good they look. But like the main thing is that load time difference. And the way that the game just sort of, because it loads so fast, it just treats the load totally differently. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's loading because it's a transition, not a loading screen. And there's a big, I think, cognitive difference that you as the player experience because it's presented in this very different way.
Exactly. I mean, you know, nicer graphics ultimately don't change how you play the game. They do in some senses if, like, you can pull off things you couldn't before. Performance upgrades certainly can change how you play. But just like, you know, Demon Souls looking nicer does not make you play Demon Souls differently. Demon Souls not having load times makes you play it differently.
Yeah.
And that's what feels next gen. Absolutely. And it is, we talked about this last week, but having really got, you know, like, devoured it, it is so cool to have this next-gen experience that, like, makes use of so much of what the PS5 has, but is built on the bones of this, like, fucking masterpiece. And so it is this uncommonly good console launch game, you know? And it is both a showcase for the future of gaming and a really beautiful recreation of a major moment in the history of gaming. It's incredible, and, you know, I think we should talk about the graphics. Bluepoint, I don't think, can be commended enough for the utter aesthetic triumph that is this game. And I know some people don't like every aspect of the remake that they've done, but, like, one, I have not played the entire PS3 game, so I don't have those preconceived notions, but, like, you can't deny, graphically, there's never been anything like this. This just feels like such a new experience, like, just down to the way light casts on bricks when you're going through a little tunnel in a castle, and it's literally breathtaking. It's like, I have never seen anything remotely like this playing a video game, and it is just, Demon Souls is just one moment after another. And I think it's not just a coat of paint. The Souls games, the Miyazaki formula, is so much about atmosphere. It is so much about, like, breathing in the mise-en-scène, and the incredible aesthetics of this Demon Souls remake makes me do that more than in the other Souls games I've played, you know? And it's just like, I feel like a part of this world because the world is so beautifully mounted. And it's not just the visuals, it's also the sound. This has some of the best sound design I've ever heard in a game. It's an incredible achievement that Bluepoint has pulled off here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've seen the like screenshots going around Twitter of people being like, I don't like they redesigned this element of this like one character or whatever. And it's like I get it. I mean, I don't have personally like this incredible reverence for the specific aesthetics of a Demon's Souls. Like I like the monster designs and everything, but that game has a very PS3 like sparseness to its look, and like the bad frame rate and all that. Like I've never had, and it's kind of infamous for having this very kind of like what people call the piss filter. Like it's got this just sort of like yellow green malaise over the image, that is very of that period, in terms of game aesthetics. And it's like there's stuff I really like about the aesthetics of the original game. There's stuff I don't like about it. And I think you can quibble about specific design choices on specific monsters or whatever. But I think overall the remake has, for me, breathed so much life into this experience. And there's an uncanny quality to it of occasionally stumbling across an area and remembering like, oh, right, no, I totally did this whole area. Like I completed Shrine of Storms like, 10 years ago when I played Demon's Souls for the first time? And I guess it would have been like 8 years ago since I played Demon's Souls for the first time. And I've done this stuff before, and I'll have this occasion like, this is the same area, but it feels like it's such a much more fuller realization of what like aesthetically is trying to happen. I think there's a couple of areas you can point to. For me, I think probably the biggest one that is the biggest upgrade is the Shrine of Storms, because now there's an actual storm. And having the like rain, and part of that is the sound, and part of it is just like the graphical effects, and everything is like wet, and the overcast clouds, and like the general bluish aesthetic that area always had, but then that being contrasted with like the harsh red fire. And some of that is like what HDR is able to deliver with like the brightness of the fire and stuff like that, and having fucking lightning strike the tree as you walk through the gate at the beginning of the Shrine of Storms. That stuff really just sort of brings the whole world together, and there's like a holistic aesthetic achievement there, with just like it is both like a lot of the realism that is achieved, but it is also still very stylized, right? Like it's very over the top in like the mood it's expressing through its visuals, but being able to sort of ground that in like wet stone looks like wet stone, right? A lot of those sort of like physical details of the world are so convincingly recreated, that yeah, I feel like every single area I go to just feels so aesthetically transformed into what does feel to me like a very like honest and like genuine reimagining of what those areas look like. It doesn't feel to me like they are like changing dramatically what the aesthetics of Demon's Souls are. It feels like they are trying to evoke what Demon's Souls was trying to evoke, partially by taking clear cues from later Miyazaki games. Like it's clear that they looked at how did they deal with added detail in the world that you could have in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne when they went to the PS4, and how can we take some of the direction that they went aesthetically and use that to inform then how do we take the expanded technology we have to add detail into the world of the PS3 game. Because if they made the game today, if Miyazaki made Demon's Souls in 2020, the game wouldn't be this like sparse, barren world, because that's not actually like really what his aesthetic like design goals generally are. It's just at a certain point, the frame rate gets too bad, even for Miyazaki. So you have to pull shit out until the world feels barren, right? And yeah, there's just something about like the crispness of the world, and all of the different worlds that all feel so aesthetically powerful in this game.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like, and I have less experience with the original game. I've played a little bit of Demon's Souls. I basically played through some of the first area, though I didn't even get to like the phalanx, because at that point like the servers were off and I wasn't really feeling it. So I don't really know what the original looks like, but it just feels like such a loving, lavish production. Like I feel like you can feel the amount of respect Bluepoint has for the game through how much work has been put into all of it, you know? Like I've seen some people compare this to like Halo Anniversary. It's not. It's so much better than that. And like I have different feelings on Halo CE Anniversary because I have specific I have like the nitpicks of like I don't like their design choices in that, but also like that is a pretty simple overhaul and feels kind of rushed when you look at it. I don't think there's anything you can point to. Like, there are things you can point to in Demon's Souls and say, okay, this is a change and I like it or I dislike it. What I don't think you can say is this feels rushed and cheap, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you could say that about the Halo Anniversary games. No, I mean, what I've just felt, Sean, because I have not played Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne, so just keep that in mind. Those are the two I still have to get to, and I absolutely will, because I want to, I just haven't gotten to those yet. But, like, there is this feeling of, like, this is obviously the biggest production values that have ever been given to a FromSoftware title, and seeing sort of the aesthetic underlying kind of vision and sense of scale and scope that is there in these games, especially these early ones, that was not fully realized for technical, for budgetary, for whatever reasons there were. Like the Archdemon in the Shrine of Storms, when you get there. I don't know what they did on the original PS3, but it could not have been what they pulled off on the PS5, because what they pulled off on the PS5, it's not a difficult boss fight, but it is one of the most awe-inspiring boss fights I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And what they pulled off with it, it's like, oh my god, I feel like I'm because like I feel like Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2 to an extent, those games, like in their original forms, evoke a lot to me, and they inspire like a lot of imagination. And I feel like Demon Souls, I'm playing in my imagination of what the larger world of that game is. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, because I have not gotten to where you are or where that is in this remake, but I know the boss fight you're talking about.
Yeah.
Partially because they reference it very directly in Dark Souls 3, because Dark Souls 3 is kind of like a best of the franchise sort of game. And yeah, that's one of the ones I'm like really excited by. You get like a brief glimpse of it, I remember, in one of the early trailers, and I was like, I can't wait to see this fucking boss, because it's one of the coolest things in Demon Souls. And for me, like the big test of have they managed to, I think, replicate what was effective about the aesthetic design of the original game with the remake was the beginning of the Tower of Latria, in that first area of the Tower of Latria, which is to me like the thing about Demon Souls that was, when I played it originally, was the most impressive part of it. And I think is like one of the enduring legacies of Demon Souls that, again, is something that they take and kind of do a remix of in Dark Souls 3, because they know the Tower of Latria is just this incredibly iconic area, and the like labyrinthine prison you move through, and then the mind flayers with their fucking ringing bells, and the merchant of that area, which is a noblewoman that you have this like haunting operatic like female vocals playing throughout the whole area, and then you stumble into her cell, and all of a sudden the vocals stop because you realize she was actually singing it like it was diegetic in the world, and because it's like echoing around, and it's just such a haunting area. And it was, to me, like the thing about the aesthetic design of the PS3 game that was the most successful, partially because it's like contained, it's dark, and so it plays to sort of like the technical limitations of the system. They were able to do more with it, and kind of evoke more of that mood more effectively than they could like the more open areas in the Boletaria or the Shrine of Storms and stuff like that. But playing through the fucking Tower of Latria on the remake, it evokes and then I think enhances all those elements. Like the design choice to have lightning flash in the sky in that area to illuminate for like a brief instance the area around you, while still keeping the whole area like oppressively dark and unsettling, with like the weird like green fog that comes off of those like incense holders or whatever that shit is. Like it captures that mood so well while enhancing it with the other elements they can do. And that's where like the sound design you talked about earlier, with like the echo of like being in this massive prison, it's just so fucking good all the way through.
Yeah, no, I think the Tower of Latria is the best part of the game from what I've played so far. Certainly on that design level, like it's exactly what you say. You can feel the entire like Souls series being born in that area. That really does feel like where it ultimately like most strongly comes together. Of you can just, it immediately evokes several areas from Dark Souls. I think it evokes a lot in Sekiro. I think takes a lot from like that kind of area. And you can just feel that. And like, I also think it's the most graphically stunning in this remake. Like everything they do with, because particularly I think the most impressive thing in the Demon Souls remake is the lighting. The lighting is unreal. It is like no game console could do this before. And most games like on PC wouldn't do anything like this because it's just so crazy, and it's so bespoke to like what the PS5 can do, the way it like casts light and shadow on everything, and everything is so sculptural. And they talk about this in all the different Digital Foundry breakdowns that are out now, but like the amount of tessellation in the environment, which is to say how much detail you have on every surface. Most of these surfaces are just completely flat on the PS3, but they are all molded and three-dimensional, and the bricks like have things that like stick out and jut out, and so there's so many crevices for that light to go in. It feels so like textural and haptic, I feel like. And no, the Tower of Latria is genuinely very challenging, and it is a maze, and you feel like a rat in a fucking maze, but in the best way, in the way that like, okay, so there was a article on Kotaku this week that was explaining all the ways like Demon Souls is delightfully challenging, and they explained some of those things, and then there were all these comments from people who have never played Souls games being like, man, I hate when people talk about this, because every time I hear it, I'm like, why would anyone want to play this? This sounds like the game is just trolling you. And I'm like, they are, but it's so good. And it's like, this is, the Tower of Latria to me defines how it is difficult to recommend Souls to someone, because you just have to experience it. And I know that because I was on this podcast for many years, a Souls virgin, hearing Sean talk about it and not fully believing you that it was good because it sounded annoying. And you know what? If I described to you the first boss of the Tower of Latria, which is this witch who won the boss fight. I actually think the boss fight is very cool. It can be a little annoying because she can split into like 5 bodies, and you do all that and you win, and then nothing happens. And nothing happens. And you're like, what did I do? What did I do wrong? And you leave, and then you finally look it up on your phone, and you find out that guy you met earlier, who was just this caster just hanging around, and he said, hey, I'm not your enemy, and he didn't hurt me, so I didn't kill him. Uh-oh, if you don't kill that guy, then the witch will not disappear. And so you have to go backtrack and find him and brutally murder him, and then go do the boss fight again, and now you can proceed. I know that if you have not played Souls, that sounds like stupid, trolly bullshit, and it's genuinely one of my favorite things I've ever done in a game. It is so... I howled with laughter when I realized what they were doing. The Souls games are funny, and there's something about the way the Tower of Latria is this big maze. It is genuinely difficult. Those fucking wizard dudes with the squid heads are terrifying, and they always scare me no matter how good I get at working around them. And it is gothic and scary and oppressive and big and suggests all this lore and darkness and decay. And it is also deeply funny.
Yeah.
And there's something about that mix of the horror and the sense of humor that, like, that is where Miyazaki kind of lives to me.
Yeah, I love when you get all the way down to the bottom of the Tower of Latria, and then you get this, like, Resident Evil-ass cutscene where it shows a giant statue that, like, unfolds and just shoots an infinite number of arrows that you have to sneak around and turn off. It's like, this fucking, like, it's just like that moment in Resident Evil 4 where the giant statue comes to life and, like, chases after you. Just, like, this is, like, ridiculous, but it still, like, fits into the world in this, like, crazy fucking way. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, there's something funny in this, like, this balance of the tone of, like, the Tower of Latria is by far, well, I guess you have the Valley of Defilement, that's also extremely impressive, but that's impressive because of, like, the poison kind of element of it. Like, the Tower of Latria is, like, just psychologically oppressive because you're also running into these, like, naked, like, emaciated prisoners that some of them attack you because they have daggers, and some of them just, like, I mean, you can kill them and the game's not going to stop you from killing them, but they just kind of walk up and they just, like, put their hands up, and they're, you know, they can't talk because they've been tortured for, like, an eternity. Some of them are fucking, like, trapped in just, like, giant clay pots, and it's, like, fucked up. And then you have, crazy squid mind flayer dudes walking around with bells that paralyze you and just, like, suck your brains out of your head. It's a fucked up area that also, like, has, like, these weird sort of, like, almost, like, kind of meta jokes. Like, that's where, like I said earlier, like, the one moment I got frustrated with the game was when I fell down a fucking hole because the area is so dark you can't see this stupid fucking hole in the ground, and everybody falls down that hole.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I did it too.
Yeah, because it's designed to make you fall down it, right? Like, it's the thing that, like, when the Souls games work, part of what makes them work is, like, you have so much freedom to, like, they are, like, very non-linear in most of their design elements, but they are designed so well to get in your head that even when you feel like you know them, and because again, I have played all of these fucking games, like I've played some of them multiple times at this point. If there's anyone who understands how to play these games, it's me. And yet I've seen this game be played. I played through that area before. I fell down that fucking hole 8 years ago. I did not remember it was there. And the game is so well designed to lead you where it wants you to go and make you feel and think what you want to think, that even when you think you have seen it all and done it all and you understand these games perfectly and they're not going to be able to surprise you, they still fucking do.
Yeah, and I think overall, so the Tower of Latria, like the other areas, has 2 big levels and then the Archdemon. And I have not done the Archdemon yet, but I've done the 2 big levels, including the Maneater, who is that's the boss in this game that like took me several days. We can talk about that. But I have done those 2 levels, and I think those 2 levels, for one, it's the only area in this game where I feel like one of the levels is not like slightly weaker than the other. Like they're both just absolute masterpieces, and they're so good. They might just be my favorite area in any of the Souls games I've played. And I haven't played Bloodborne or 3, but like Dark Souls overall, I probably like more as a game. But I don't know if there's any one area of Dark Souls. I think the closest would be the what do you call it? The castle in the sky that you go to.
Orlando.
Anne Orlando, yeah. I think Anne Orlando comes close to me, that like climaxes with Ornstein and Smough. I love that one. But I think that and Tower of Latria would be in some position my like number 1 and number 2 areas in the Souls games that I've seen so far. Because both sides of the Tower of Latria, because that first one where you're in the prison is amazing. And then this is also something that I feel like the other worlds don't do as well, is they're so differentiated. Because the second area is you're way up high above the towers, and it is aesthetically, it very clearly is the next part of this world, but it is completely different mechanically, because there's these big gargoyles you're fighting, and you have to go up, you have to find these 2 towers and like get rid of this giant pulsating beating heart thing in the middle. But to do it, you have to go up this one tower, then you have to like get in a cage and go down into this like swampy area, and then it all culminates in the Maneater boss, which is really tough. But also getting to the Maneater boss, you have to go up this like infinite stair loop that looks so cool. Oh my god, Tower of Latria is like, just genuinely, all of it is some of the best stuff I've ever played in a video game, period. It is so good. And I like all the other areas of Demon's Souls very much, but it is like the clear, this is what makes this game a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's like, it is the thing that you really should play Bloodborne, Jonathan, because I feel like...
I know, I need to.
Yeah, because the Tower of Latria is like a clear inspiration with like the gothic, like weird sort of vaguely Lovecrafty thing that, like, you know, because the mind flayers are little like Cthulhu dudes, right? So it's very much like playing in that same space that then eventually goes kind of the whole hog on with Bloodborne. But yeah, no, it is, yeah, it's a phenomenal game. Tower of Latria is my favorite area. I also really love the Shrine of Storms.
Love the Shrine of Storms.
Which I there's something about, like, I don't know if I love that. I don't remember really like that area making a huge impression on me originally. But there's something about it here, like I just adore. Like, I love what they've done, like making the like weird flying manta rays feel more like real to me. There's something about them that struck me as very goofy when I played the PS3 game, because it just seemed ridiculous. And here they like feel like they should exist in that world, and I think it's part of like the aesthetic overhaul has grounded some of those slightly more like absurd elements that make them like fit into the overall design aesthetic. So I like the weird giant flying manta rays that just shoot weird like crystal bullets from you from on high. And that's one of the reasons why I like playing a Dex build, is that if you're not playing a Dex build, you don't have a lot of tools to kill those things. But if you got a good arrow or bow and arrow, you can just fucking shoot those things right out of the sky. Like, fuck off.
Oh yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, we should talk about what builds we're playing in a second. But yes, the Shrine of Storms I also think is great. I think level 1 of Shrine of Storms is one of the best parts of the game. That one, it's also like, it's a bitch. It is so hard, and I love it. It's like unraveling that entire world was one of the most stressful parts of this game for me, and I loved it. I thought the second part was... the challenge felt more annoying to me. There's a lot of like kind of trolley elements to that one, I think. And then the Archdemon in that one is just phenomenal. We already talked about it. So anyway, love all of that. In terms of other areas, World 1, all the Boletaria stuff, I think is fantastic. Yeah. It's very like, that's the world that like, okay, this is what Dark Souls becomes, you know? If like if the Tower of Latria is Bloodborne, then I think Boletaria is like very clearly Dark Souls. And there's a lot of like Anor Londo stuff, I feel like, in that one, but it's very good. The Tower Knight is not a super tough boss, but in this version, God, it's cool.
It's very fucking cool. Yeah, it is.
Also,
because they always did the thing where when you hit him at the feet, like they start spurting like spirit juice, whatever the fuck that is, like that he's like animated by.
Yeah.
There's something about it here that just like that's one of those sound effects they get that just feels so perfectly tuned, of just like popping a fucking cork and a wine bottle or something, and then just like this like spirit energy starts pouring out of his ankle.
Oh my god, it's so good. And then also World 1 has all the stuff with the dragons. And man, oh man, that was maybe the most powerful, like, oh my god, this is a new console moment for me in terms of the graphics and stuff. Was I had my nice Bluetooth headphones on. I had the best way to play this game is turn off all the lights, be in the dark, have headphones on, and just be in it. And that's how I've been playing it at night. And just like that first moment where you see the dragon like swoop overhead and then burn the entire bridge ahead of you, and then in World 1, 2, when you start to realize that, oh shit, what I have to do is time my runs across this bridge to the dragon's fire, it is such an amazing set piece. And oh my god, and all the like HDR with the fire is some of the coolest color stuff they do. Man alive. I was almost kind of sad when I did eventually kill the dragon so I could get a pure white tendency in that world. And I was a little sad when he was gone because the fire stuff was so cool.
That was one of my big... I have not changed that much as a person over these 8 years, was when I was like, am I really going to spend 10 fucking minutes just standing here shooting arrows at this fucking dragon like I did 8 years ago? I didn't even finish the game when I played 8 years ago, but I saw that you got a thing if you shot the dragon, and I was like, I'm going to shoot that dragon, and I'm here, I'm like, I know that with the character I'm playing, I don't even need any of the fucking items I'm going to get. Well, I'm still going to shoot him with it. I'm still going to stand here and spend 10 minutes shooting him with these fucking arrows.
Yes. At the point I did it, I had some white arrows, I think, and those took him down really fast. I don't know if it even took me 10 whole minutes.
I had like a level 3 longbow and just shot him with normal arrows, but I just bought... That's one of the... You can buy arrows so cheap. I just had like 700 of them. Like, I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to put on a podcast and I'm going to turn off the adaptive triggers to make it faster to pull. I'm just going to sit here and just like every like 4 seconds where I was just like 1, 2, 3, 4, shoot the arrow. 1, 2, 3, 4, shoot the arrow. And that's what I did.
It's weirdly meditative.
Yeah.
Okay, other worlds. World 5, The Valley of Defilement, is the pure id of Miyazaki's Inner Troll, because that world is just... I actually find it very funny, because it is like, literally, you start that world, you step forward, and you fall off a cliff, because what you're supposed to do is actually climb up these stairs that are behind you. It is so mean, and that entire area... It's like, it's hard in the sense of there's just a million... There's like no individual elements that are super tough, but there are a million slightly hard elements that like pile on, and it's like, I find it very funny. And then the second area of that one is where you're having to move through all the sludge and the slime in the water, and I actually think that's a pretty good area. And it does not have the thing that, like in Dark Souls, you could get the ring back in the prison that would allow you to go through Blight Town unencumbered in water. There's nothing like that in Demon Souls. You are fully encumbered in water, and it is tough, but I actually really wound up enjoying that world a lot. And then the final boss of World 5 I really like. It's more conceptual than any other boss. It's very weird, but it's really cool, and like the staging of it is awesome. World 2 is the only one I feel like I don't fully love, although there's parts of it. I think the first level of World 2 is pretty good. I just don't find it as distinctive as some of the other ones, all the Stone Fang tunnel stuff. There is some very cool stuff in there, though.
I agree. Yeah, I think World 2 is like clearly the one that's the weakest. Like, I think 2-1 is fine. I just played through 2-2 last night and fought the Flame Lurker, and I just kind of found a lot of that area tedious. Just because it's a lot of like, okay, here's an enemy that just has a shit ton of health. Okay, let me just sit here and hit it over and over with my sword, or like kind of try to like go in the tunnels, navigate around it. Like, there's good stuff in there, but it doesn't feel totally like fine-tuned quite right.
I agree.
Yeah.
2-2, you like really have to have something with magic, because those enemies just are such bullet sponges if you don't have a weapon. Like, I used the Crescent Falchion there, and that takes them down much faster. But even then, some of them are very spongy. Although I think the Flame Lurker is a really cool boss. I liked that one.
Yeah, I found fighting him kind of, because I didn't even die to him. It was just say like, okay, we're just gonna... There's another like... He just has like a little bit too much health, and like... it's one of those where when you play Bloodborne and then especially Sekiro, you just get so spoiled on how good they get with boss fights later that it's like the Flame Lurker has like 3, maybe 4 attacks, and they're all kind of very similar. It's just like, okay, I think there's something about like Sekiro, especially having the like clarity, the like precise clarity of what you can and cannot block and what you can and cannot parry, that like I've been trying to do more parry stuff in Demon's Souls, and I'm like way better at it than I've ever been in any of the Souls games. I think because I've like learned the timing a little bit better. But I've been constantly reminded of why I never really engaged with that system much in Dark Souls or 2 or 3. Is because it's just like sometimes you just have no idea, is this a thing I can parry or not? Like, did I fuck up the parry by mistiming it, or is it just an attack that cannot be parried? Because there are lots of attacks that can't be parried. And so some of that stuff with like some of those enemies that feel, because Flame Lurker feels like a very simplistic version of a Bloodborne boss, but a Bloodborne has the gun parry mechanic that makes those kinds of boss fights way more interesting. And so that's one of those areas where I feel like it's good for what it is, but I've played versions of this boss that are so much fucking better that it's kind of tedious to go back to this like way more kind of simplified version of what they do in the later games.
Yeah, and I guess I don't have that problem because I haven't played Bloodborne. I agree. It's not like that's one of the ones that is hard for me to separate the like actual underlying boss design from the just crazy cool aesthetics that Bluepoint has added, because you can't deny he's a cool looking boss.
Yes, they really kind of glammed up that cutscene that he has when he jumps out, and it's just like, look
so
at this
good.
Fucking flame ape gorilla man thing, whatever the fuck he is.
I mean, really, all the bosses, even if they're not that hard, or if their underlying design isn't that interesting, conceptually, I find most of the bosses in this game really cool. Like the old hero who is blind and like emaciated, and you can sneak around him. Or in the Valley of Defilement, there's one that is like a lady made of fucking like bugs and stuff that looks like something from like a Tim Burton stop motion thing. There's so many cool ones that I feel like are conceptually really interesting, and like I feel like they would do a better job in later games maybe mixing the conceptual with the design elements, but you can see the seeds of that there, and it's really fun. And then the archdemons are very conceptual in cool ways. I have 2 more of those to do. But anyway, what kind of build are you playing?
The same build I always play, Jonathan. I have my Uchigatana, and my kite shield, and my bow and arrow. And then I am now at the point where I got the ring that allows you to like increase your equipment load, and I have my strength up enough that I have on like medium level armor with like a couple of light armor pieces to get like to craft my whole look that I've got going on. Because I always play these games the exact same, except for one thing I've now added in is my lethal secret dagger. Because I got the secret dagger from the Tower of Latria, and then if you upgrade that with Marrow Stone, you at the special blacksmith, you can go down this lethal tree with dagger weapons that specifically just increase its amount of damage when you do parries or you do backstabs. And so that is now like a new thing I've added into the mix, because I'm trying to do more parry stuff, and the parries with that dagger do so much fucking damage. And that is one area where they also, Bluepoint went kind of above and beyond the Call of Duty in recreating this game, is the new animations they have done for all the ripostes and the backstabs are so good.
They're so good.
Yeah.
And the sounds.
Oh, yeah.
The sound design, when you stab someone in the back with the surprise attacks, and if you're playing this without headphones, what it'll do is it'll put that sound through the controller, and it is the gnarliest, grossest, like, it sounds like someone took like a big slab of meat into the Foley studio and just started hitting it with different knives, because that's what it sounds like, and it is... I love it. It is gnarly as hell.
Yeah, they're very gnarly. They're like really like the Uchigatana, like the whole katana class of weapons, because every class of weapons now has a unique backstab and riposte animation, which I think some of them did in the original game, but definitely not this many. And the ones that are here are all like updated and modified. The katana class weapon ones are very, very cool. He does a little like flick at the end to flick blood off the sword, and it's like, that's very good little touch. But I would definitely recommend people playing this game to go and just load into World 1-1 with like just like load up on like all the different weapon types and just go through and see all the animations, and not just see them, but like do them, because there's something way more satisfying about actually doing it rather than just seeing a YouTube video of them, because they are very fucking good. Particularly, don't sleep on the fist weapons ones, because those are kind of maybe the best. Like, I'm never going to use a fist weapon in a Dark Souls game because they seem shitty. Because one thing you really want to have is some amount of reach with your attacks. But when you do the riposte or the backstabs, you just beat the shit out of these dudes with your fucking fists. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's fucked up looking, but it's great.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. So I have been playing a very similar build to what I did in Dark Souls 1, which is I started as a hunter and had my axe. My, I think, hunting axe? What are they? No, it's not a great axe. It's a something else axe. But anyway.
Hand axe?
No, it's not a hand axe. And it's not a great axe.
Is it
It might just be hunting. I think it's maybe just a hunting axe.
It might be a hunting axe. I didn't play as the hunter.
Okay. So anyway, but I used an axe for a lot of Dark Souls 1 also. And I like the axe because it is big and heavy and does a lot of damage, but like the way its timing works with the timing of a lot of enemies, I just like instinctively I feel it really well. So I was playing with that for the most part. I've also had a compound long bow and all my arrows, and I've been upgrading all this stuff. I started with the heater shield, then I found something, the spike shield, which is this like gnarly like metal shield with all these spikes, and it's got the same thing. It's 100% block, but it's better at everything, and it levels pretty easily with everything else. So I've been doing that. I had at one point I found some chainmail armor that I really liked, and I wanted to be able to use that, so I just went and farmed souls for about half an hour, and then I leveled my endurance to like a crazy level so I could put it all on and still have the quick roll. And that actually helped later, because later in the game, once I started getting into the whole system of crafting the like final weapons from all the demon souls, I wound up creating the Dozer Axe, which is this giant axe that weighs 22 pounds, so it takes up a lot of your equip load, and it is this, you have to use a Great Axe level 6 plus one of the demon souls. I forget which demon it is. And the Great Axe plus 6 actually had everything I needed right off the bat, so I just did that really quick. And then I made this. And the Dozer Axe has, Sean, the reason I was attracted to it is it has 320 attack. Jesus. It is insanely powerful, but it is this gigantic, you should go look at it because it's fucking hilarious. It's like bigger than the guy in the game. And you have to have a strength of 30 to use it one-handed. So I also then went and... Well, actually, after I beat the Archdemon in World 4, you wind up being able to farm souls really easily. So I got my strength up really fast. And then this axe I'm actually now using is like my axe, like one-handed with a shield, and then I have some assassin's armor, and I am all still under the 50% weight, so I feel like I am utterly breaking the fucking game at this point, because that axe is ludicrous. It's this big 22-pound thing. It's not even sharp. It's just, the axe is like this giant thing, and the sharp end of it is actually this big curved thing. It's more like a hammer in the shape of an axe, and you just beat people to death with it. But it is kind of amazing. It can kill a bunch of stuff in one hit. It actually made the Archdemon in World 5 very easy, because I just decimated the thing you need to fight there. So that is one of the things I'm having fun with. I also made the lava bow. I'm enjoying the lava bow. So yeah, and then I kind of went through the list, and then I wound up, because I needed a bunch of souls to get that strength up. Any of the souls for like weapons I knew I was never going to use, I wound up like using those souls and just taking the souls. But I still have a couple that I'm saving to use that I want to make some weapons with. But yeah, it's so much fun, Sean.
Yeah, I just ate all the demon souls I got, because it was like, the Uchigatana is the weapon for me in the Dark Souls games. It has like, and I love, because going back to Demon Souls, all through all of these games, it has the exact same moveset. They fucking never changed it, because it's just perfect. When you do it one-handed, the light attack is long horizontal swipes. You can hit multiple enemies with it, and then the heavy attack one-handed is a piercing attack that is a thrust that does better damage. Just like I have been one-shotting Crystal Lizards almost the entire game just with that one-shot heavy attack, because it does piercing damage instead of slashing damage. And then two-handed, all the attacks are big overhead swings, so they don't hit the walls, and then they can also hit stuff that's in the air. And then the R2, which is my favorite thing, the two-handed R2 attack with the Uchigatana, which is just, he just fucking stands there. It's basically the Ichimonji attack from Sekiro, where he just stands there, holds it above his head, and it's a huge wind-up, but he swings it down and it does a shit ton of damage. And I always try to finish off a boss with that, because I feel like I'm just stunting on them, that I'm going to finish you off with this, like, ridiculous, stupid, like, it never has, like, a legitimate application other than if it's a slow-moving enemy that's coming towards you, you can anticipate it well, but I always like to finish them off off with my big, stupid, giant slice that just takes like 5 seconds to pull off. Because it's like, fuck you, boss. Like, I'm not just going to kill you. I'm going to kill you and look cool doing it. So I always tell myself I'm going to try a different weapon. I bought and downloaded Dark Souls Remastered because it's 50% off on PSN. And I'm probably going to end up replaying that now because Demon's Souls has got me in the mood again. And I'm telling myself I'm going to try a different weapon. I know I'm going to just kill the fucking merchant at the beginning of Dark Souls like I did when I first played that game. And he drops a fucking Uchigatana and you can get it in like 10 minutes. And then I was just like, well, this is the weapon I'm going to use. And I know I'm not going to be able to resist just going back to it because it's just how I like to play these fucking games.
Absolutely. I actually just bought the whole Dark Souls trilogy, the like physical pack, because I still need to play 3, and I didn't have remastered on PS4 yet. I had that on Switch, so... and then 2 is in there also. But anyway, I'm excited to play 3, and I want to play 1 again at some point. So anyway, yeah. I think that's probably enough Demon's Souls for now. This game is amazing. We'll probably talk a little bit more about it. You'll certainly hear about it on our year-end podcast. This fucking game rocks, Sean.
It's very good. Yeah, I'm extremely excited to... because there's something very fun about knowing basic, like, because I've forgotten most of what the details of any of the stuff, especially the latter half that I didn't personally play through with Demon's Souls, but I remember some of the big moments, like I remember what most of the bosses are, and so it's fun for me, like, being able to sort of, like, be lost in a lot of the details, but knowing that's like, oh shit, I can't wait to see what they do with this boss and, like, how good it looks. Like, it is, if you, like, played through Demon's Souls and you're wondering, like, do I really need to replay through this? Like, it is so much fun seeing some of that shit you've seen before, like, and just how far video game graphics in, like, technical sense have come since what it was, like, not even, like, a particularly good-looking PS3 game, and then now, like, the best-looking video game in the fucking world is Demon's Souls. It's a pretty good feeling.
Oh, it's a pretty good feeling. It really speaks to how much... Miyazaki's vision has taken over gaming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That this was like, if you read about the history of Demon's Souls, this was such a weird idea that, like, when he presented it to Sony, he had to, like, hide certain parts of what he wanted to do because he knew they wouldn't go for it. And now it is, as you say, the game with, like, the highest production values in the history of gaming. It's so crazy.
It's very good.
Oh, you want to talk about Miles Morales?
Yes, let's talk about another video game that is very fucking good. Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales.
It's so good. I feel like we did all the gameplay discussion last week. I don't know if there's a ton more to do on that level. As we said, it is Marvel Spider-Man, but it plays even better. And it has, like, even more, I feel like, expressive qualities with Miles as more of a character. But I really want to dig into the story here, Sean, because I think this is one of the best Spider-Man stories I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Particularly the ending. It is just beautiful, and I love this game to death. I love Miles Morales as a character. After I finished this game, then I watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse again on 4K Blu-ray, which, Sean, go buy that if you have not yet.
I've got good news for you, Jonathan. I already own it.
Okay, good. Because the 4K Blu-ray of Spider-Verse is one of the best 4K Blu-rays money can buy.
Yeah, I haven't watched the whole movie because I didn't have time, but I did get it in yesterday. And then I just was like, I'm just going to watch the What's Up Danger scene, and I'm going to watch, like, some of the shit at the very end just to, like, see it and see how much better. I first watched it with the Blu-ray version, and then I put it into the 4K Blu-ray because I wanted to compare it. And, yeah, it looks very good.
Oh, it's night and day. The Blu-ray just can't do the colors. It just literally, the colors of that movie are too complex. The Blu-ray looks like a DVD or something in comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but I love Miles Morales. I love how this game and Spider-Verse come at Miles Morales from really different angles, but they ultimately kind of come to a similar thematic push at the end, but also achieving it differently. And he's just, I feel like between this game and that movie, Miles is now one of my single favorite comic book characters. I love him.
Yeah, no, he's so good. It's one of those things where, like, I really love, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man movies, and I like Tom Holland a lot. But it does, like, especially now looking at that choice that they made to do a young Peter Parker rather than do Miles Morales, it is looking like every year that goes by, that choice is reflected poorer and poorer of, like, because they basically did make Miles Morales, they just made him white and, like, took away some of, like, the specific, like, family setup and stuff that he has. Because, yeah, I feel like each major Miles Morales story we've gotten in, like, I need to dig more into the comic books because I've been reading a little bit of them, but, like, I now want to, like, actually do a proper read through of his stuff, because, I mean, he comes out of Ultimate Spider-Man, which is one of my favorite comic books, But yeah, like every time I engage with that character in any way, in any of the mediums I've engaged with him in now, I always come out of it so invigorated and like feel like inspired by the sense of a lot of that we can reinvigorate and bring new life into like a very old genre that has a lot of very old tropes, that has been so secluded for so long. And it's like the idea of having a like classical style superhero character that is new and is so successful as Miles Morales. Like the other one we have, I think we're going to get there now that she's getting her TV show, is Kamala Khan is the other one. But it's like we had just gone so long without having like what felt like a brand new superhero character rather than new takes on like existing superheroes that have been around for decades. Miles Morales just has that quality to him, and he's so successful as a character that, as we talked about last time, every team that it feels like approaches him is made better by the material because of how effective the character and like his story setup is, and like the life of the character is so powerful.
He's a character of the moment who like just feels modern in a way that other superheroes don't.
Yeah.
There's less you have to tweak to make Miles Morales feel like a 2020 character, because he was made in like 2010. You know, it's like he is an of the moment hero. And yeah, the way this game approaches its story and makes it so personal and on the ground and like immediate for Miles is really beautifully done. And obviously we both think the story in the original Insomniac game is phenomenal, and it's one of the best Spider-Man stories I've seen. But like I feel like they've gotten even better at just the basics of storytelling here, and the way they tie it all in, and having the Tinkerer be, spoilers from here on out, Miles's buddy, Finn, who was his like childhood friend. And like this is the conflict now building up to the final scene, which is so phenomenal between the two of them and everything that happens, and all in the context of Miles making Harlem his new home. What they've pulled off is really stunning. It's so well done.
Yeah, it's something where I feel like the story is heavily benefited by it being a much more streamlined game. So it's like you just don't have like, and you know, I love the PS4 Marvel Spider-Man, but some of the story ends up being somewhat bogged down just by like the necessity of introducing all the mechanics in the world and the factions, and there's just so much stuff that Marvel Spider-Man has to introduce and then kind of come up with narrative justifications for, that Miles Morales, because the PS4 game set all that groundwork, Miles Morales just gets to skip all that and just jump into it. And it's like you just start with most of the major powers. You start with almost all the major powers from the first game minus the gadgets that Miles doesn't have. But it doesn't have to do like, here's all the tower missions, and it's like all like the collectibles are way more sort of like streamlined and cut down. You don't have like, here's all the different crime types you have to do. It has some of that, but it's like, again, all of those things that were in the PS4 game is just sort of pared down to the bare essentials to get you this really streamlined, effective experience that is so propulsive. That I found like, I basically, like I said earlier in the podcast, I more or less finished the game in like the day after we did the last podcast recording, just because I was like, I started doing the next story mission. I was like, okay, I'm just on the train now because I'm just like going. And there's something very satisfying about that, about the pace of the game is so effective.
Oh, it's great. Like I 100%ed it in about 16, 17 hours. Mm-hmm. And that was like mostly in like 2 days. I just fucking devoured this game because it is so devourable. It is so, as you say, streamlined and propulsive, and like there's really nothing you do in the game, even 100%ing it, that just feels like a waste of time. It's all, not all of it is like narrative focused, but if you enjoy the basics of playing the game, it's all so fun. And then the stuff that is narrative focused is so good, and so many of those collectible things, like all of the little mementos, that the time capsules that have been left around, and you get him reflecting on Finn more, you know, and all the stuff with Uncle Aaron. And oh my god, I love the collectible that is all the beats that he and Uncle Aaron are making, all of the samples that they're finding in the world, just all these things that like make you feel like you're becoming more a part of Miles's world, and then going into these final missions that wind up being a really personal story for him, in the same way that like in Spider-Man 1 you had this very personal story with Peter and Doc Ock, but even more ramped up here because this is about his childhood friend, not this scientist dude he looked up to. Oh, it's so well done. And yeah, I think propulsive is a great word to use here. This is not an open world game that has even a hint of open world bloat to it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it has a lot of those same activities, but instead of there being like 10 hideouts, there's like 3, or I guess there's like 3 of each type, right? So there's 6 total. And
they're all really good.
Yeah, they're all really good. They're all like integrated well into the open world, and they can all be approached for fully stealth or full combat, rather than in the original game you can only do the first wave stealth or whatever it was, and then after that you have to do full combat. Like there's just a lot of those lessons they learned from making the first game they've integrated into this, and the scale gets to be pulled back enough, and the tools they are all familiar with, and the world's already built, that is just like it very much, you know, when they talked about this being like a Lost Legacy style game, like it very much has that quality to it. In the same way that the Lost Legacy is probably the best Uncharted game, this is. I mean, we only have the 2, but this is the best of the 2 Insomniac Marvel Spider-Man games that we have.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and just like the overall focus of the story, of it being the story about both Miles having to come into his own as his own Spider-Man. He's New York's only Spider-Man, as they say at the kind of at the intro point. And then that combined with his whole story of moving into Harlem, having to familiarize himself with that town, while then also dealing with these issues from his past. Like all those different facets of the story all like come together really tightly. Like I really love a lot of the sort of like smaller character scenes, like at near the beginning of the game when Finn first comes over for dinner, and they're talking while they're washing dishes, and Miles explaining why he doesn't like why he feels like a fish out of water in Harlem, and him saying like, I don't like having to ask people for directions, right, like to my home. And it's like a lot of that writing and the performances ground the character so effectively, in similar ways that Marvel Spider-Man did with Peter. That Peter, like all like the text conversations Peter has with MJ in the first game, like had that same quality. But here it's like, it feels a little bit more like grounded in universal, because I think we've all had like this exact experience of whether you're moving or like you're just, you know, going to like a new school because you're going to high school, whatever it is, this feeling of like going from a place of extreme familiarity and comfort, and then now growing up you are put, and it's not just one part of your life, every part of your life now becomes like strange and unfamiliar, that you have to like relearn everything again. Like that whole process, and combining that with the superhero side and the human side, which is the core of like a good Spider-Man story, like they just completely nail it.
Absolutely. And so many of those character moments, and I want to dig in on some of the characters because they're so compelling, but one of the things they do, you know, in the original Marvel Spider-Man on PS4, you had some of those like side missions with MJ and Miles that I think you and I liked more than a lot of people did.
Yes,
I think
stealth
we enjoyed
sequences
those.
with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't have anything like that in here, but I feel like in the terms of the pace of the game, what they've replaced it with are these Naughty Dog-esque sequences where you're just going around the house and like looking at things, or the absolutely stunning sequence near the end where you play the flashback with Finn, where you are going through the science exhibit, where it's like, I know they wouldn't have been able to play Last of Us 2 before making this game, but this feels like it was influenced by Last of Us 2 and how it does its flashback scenes, which I think are maybe my favorite parts of Last of Us 2. Just those are so good. Like I tweeted after that first scene where Miles comes home and you just explore his home, and then Finn comes over, and I said on Twitter, this is one of the best scenes in either Spider-Man game. And it is.
Yeah.
It's because there's just this... and again, breaking up the pace, not through like another combat thing, but through just a living in the space moment. It's beautifully done. It's totally on par with something like Naughty Dog, where like the beginning scene of Uncharted 4 where Nate is going around his house, the attic. It very much reminds me of that too.
Yeah, and it's one thing like thinking it also from like the Naughty Dog influences there, but in terms of the Spider-Man influence, like obviously Spider-Verse was a huge influence on this game, but just as much of an influence I feel as the Sam Raimi movies, because like that whole scene is a less Raimi version, but it is the like Thanksgiving scene from Spider-Man 1. And it's the Thanksgiving scene from Spider-Man 1. It's just you don't know it's the Thanksgiving scene from Spider-Man 1 because you don't know that she's the villain yet the first time you play the game.
This game actually has several big shout outs to Sam Raimi, including the final scene of the game is the train scene from Spider-Man 2 done beautifully. We'll talk about that in a minute.
But yeah, like that's something that I found like really powerful is like this fusion of that is like, it's not just doing Spider-Verse, which even if they just did Spider-Verse, it would be like, that's fine because that's a great movie. But you know what else is a great movie? Fucking Spider-Man 2.
Yes.
Then like, I think not just doing Spider-Verse, but like doing their own thing by pulling influences from obviously the Miles Morales comic books and then the other like major Spider-Man touchstones, which are the Raimi movies and now Spider-Verse. Them pulling all those together to create their own unique version of the character, which is very much what they incredibly successfully did with Peter in the PS4 game. Them doing that again here in a way that I almost was like kind of surprised, but I don't know why, but I didn't expect as much Raimi in here as there was, because I think it's even more reminiscent of some of those Raimi movies than the PS4 game was, which also directly quotes sequences and scenes from those movies, like it does its own train scene. But here, when there's something about when this game does it, it hits me really hard. Like that whole ending sequence hit me so hard, partially because it had like echoed so much of my own personal history with the character. But seeing it through this new lens of being like there's this feeling of like me being tomorrow I will be 28 years old. It's just like a weird thing to realize we're at the end of fucking November, Jonathan. When did that happen?
Happy birthday, Sean.
Yes, thank you. I guess when this will go up, this will be.
Yes, this is going out on your. This is Sean's birthday podcast.
This is the birthday cast. You only found out now, 2 hours into it. But there's something about we are old men, Jonathan, and like we are both 5 years older than the Peter Parker in this version of the world in the PS4 version. Yeah, so we're old motherfuckers. And there's something about like Peter Parker and specifically the original Ultimate Spider-Man Peter Parker, which that series started in 2000 or 2001. That and the Raimi version were like some of the main stuff that I grew up with before I went to some of the older comic books. And like that being like, this is a big part of my growing up and my being such a huge fan of Spider-Man. And there's something about me now being an old man who's now teaching kids who are at the age of Miles in the similar demographic as Miles, because of the school I teach at has a very high Hispanic student population. And so it's like, I know a lot of teenagers who are a lot like Miles. And there's something like, I had a very emotional experience playing this game, particularly at the end, having this like recognition and alienation of both, like, it is fundamentally the story that like is such a huge part of me and like my history with this character and like the stuff I like about this character and like some of my own like self-identity. But then also it's not my story anymore because it's now Miles's, and this feeling of like passing on the torch to this new character, this new generation, which is a lot of what like the experience of being an old white motherfucker playing this game feels like to me, is like trying to pass the torch on, like, here's like the good stuff about Spider-Man, take this and make it better. And that's, I think, like kind of like part of where this game leaves off, is the sense of Miles is now like will become like the true Spider-Man. Like he will go forward and like improve upon the foundation that Peter and then like us by extension have like built for him.
Well, you know, this is something you brought up last time, Sean, that I thought was a really canny observation, which is that the game, it's subtle, but this game really does make Peter seem kind of like a sad character.
Yeah.
And there's something about like his utter inability to balance his life in a way Miles actually kind of pulls off in this game. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't get the sense that Miles is going to have an easy life going forward. Being Spider-Man is never easy, but neither does it have to be the isolating torture that Peter has made it for himself. Like, there's this scene, I think it's when you beat the game and you're flying, you beat the game and inevitably you go zooming around the city because you have so much fun web slinging.
Yeah.
And Peter calls you up and he says, you know, now that he's back, he says, you know, I'm still going to take another couple weeks off. I have to get my life back in balance. And he says, like, I just realized, like, I need a job. And there was something about that moment where it's like, at that moment, Miles feels more mature than Peter. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like part of what this game does is it reflects on this version of Peter Parker, but that is also, I think, fairly representative of most versions of the character, particularly like the Steve Ditko version as he grows up and goes to college and graduates and stuff, the older version of that character. It reflects on him in a way that makes him really interesting to me because like you're saying, like there's something kind of sad about his life, and there's something also like naive about him. That like in it's something to talk about with this game is that it doesn't go like full, all cops are bastards or whatever. Like it's not like trying to tear down the institution, which I kind of wish it did. But also a lot of that shit happened when this game was still in development or nearing the end of its development specifically for this year, and this year's protests over the summer. But the story of this game is very much, while it's not like the American government and like the police, it is about like rich white people coming in and trying to exploit Harlem. And there's a great line at the end of the game where Miles says, like, the reason why they did it here is because they thought they could get away with it, because they thought that we were disposable. And that's like why they did it uptown in Harlem rather than in Midtown, because they couldn't get away with it there. And there's something there about where you see that's like the gaps for Peter, that Peter wouldn't see it or understand it that way, and maybe wouldn't be able to like combat the issue in the way that Miles, because he has the perspective that he has, that is more rooted in like the root of where these injustices actually are committed, that Miles is far better positioned as a character to actually deal with the like injustices of the world, rather than Peter has this very naive, I just go beat up the dude, the world will be saved. And I don't think Miles is like perfect at that. I think it has like the game has too much of a faith in institutions, which is part of an issue with like the superhero genre at large. But like where it does try to tackle it, it hits really hard for me, of seeing Peter reflected in that way, where Peter is always an imperfect character, but his imperfections are way more stark next to Miles, who is not as good as Peter in some ways, but is far better at him in sort of his clarity and seeing, I think, the world than what Peter has.
Yeah, and like one of the things this game, again, it's fairly subtle. Like a lot of these themes are not things the game comes out and says, but I think one of the things it does with like the idea of the secret identity, and that this is like an act of gospel for Peter, that you just have to keep the mask on. And by the end, it kind of tears that down in that because the big final scene is basically all of his Harlem neighbors realizing Miles is Spider-Man. And that is not a scary moment. It is a liberating moment. It is an empowering moment that he fully is able to take this mantle as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because they know who he is and he is their neighbor. And that like creates this level of trust that they have, like a solidarity among the people, not among the institutions. Whereas keeping the mask on ultimately will always make Spider-Man this deputized agent of the cops, in a sense, And I mean, one thing that is notable in this game is Miles does not have this relationship with the police that Peter has. His dad was a cop, but he's not going around calling Yuri, sending people to Rikers, talking about like, you're going to rot in a cell, and that's funny. Part of that I think they've removed because they got criticism from the 2018 game and realized, yeah, that's in bad taste.
Yeah.
And some of it is just like, I don't think Miles would quite be that guy. And I do think in future games, I'd love for them to explore more about like, what does it mean for his dad to have been a cop, and a good cop who did a good job, but like his ties to that institution in New York. There's a lot of meaty narrative potential there,
Absolutely, yeah. It is a thing where this game leaves off in such a way that it's like the game tells its whole complete story, but it also it very quickly put Spider-Man, which please just call the game Marvel Spider-Man. I so desperately, don't call it Marvel Spider-Man 2, please call it Spider-Man. I so desperately need that. It would be so good. But it sets up a dynamic I hope that they take up that seems so interesting, which is if you can tie it with the black suit stuff, which they sort of re-teased in the same way that they did in the first game, because they're obviously not like dealing with any of the Norman Osborn, Harry Osborn stuff. But they tease the Venom symbiote stuff again, but now seeing it in the light of, well, we now have Miles as an established Spider-Man. And part of what the Black Suit Spider-Man story is exposing like the bad parts of Peter. Like combining those two stories together, there's such a powerful potential. And then combining it with some of the stuff that you're saying, if I really would love for them to try to grapple more like full-throatedly with the sort of some of the contradictions of Miles and like where we are in the world in terms of the relationship between the black community and the police and the institutions and like the government and all that. Like I'm not necessarily going in with like massive hopes that they're going to try to like dismantle the institutions and all of that, because it is also a Sony game and it is a superhero game, and like the genre has certain expectations that it's hard for it to break from. But I think there's so much fertile ground here to really like push the boundaries in a way that this game does push the boundaries. Because one thing like that is like crazy to think about is that as much as like Demon's Souls is like the longer game and the bigger game and the one that like video game nerds are going to focus on the most because it's a Demon's Souls game, like Marvel Spider-Man on the PS4 sold over 20 million copies at this point. Miles Morales is the premier launch game for the PS5 by far in terms of like the public consciousness. And to have the premier launch game of a new console be a game that both stars an Afro-Latino teenager, so it's like a black kid who also has Hispanic roots, and they have him fucking speak Spanish and stuff. Have that be the main character. They don't shy away from it. They go whole hog in on his identity. But then also have like the Black Lives Matter mural that doesn't just exist in the world, but like a quest line takes you right there and you get it. And like anyone who's done that, one of like the major side quest chains in the game has a fucking screenshot on their PS5 hard drive that has a Black Lives Matter mural on it. The fact that's what's happening with a Sony launch game is crazy. Like I cannot like in the world where Ubisoft like is consistently insisting that their games are apolitical, even when they literally frame Watch Dogs 3 as being a post-Brexit England, they still tell you that it's apolitical, and like that's the attitude that people have. That like this game can just come out the way that it is. It's not perfect with its politics, but it is so much better than you would ever expect from a big AAA game that has like the level of pressure on it that this one has. I think it's like well worth remarking how notable that is, and how happy it made me feel to see that as like they are not cowering behind apoliticism or something and to like disguise the character's identity or something, that they're like fully committing to it.
I mean, talking about identity, Sean, this is a world we live in where Ubisoft still only puts the male version of the character on the cover, even though every year after year, everyone says the female version of the character in the new Assassin's Creed is the better character, in a world where Cyberpunk is also coming out with the dude on the front, even though you can also play as a lady. That Mass Effect trilogy, the remaster, when that comes out in the spring, it'll have male Shepard on it, even though nobody on Earth thinks Fem Shep is not the better Shep. This is just how they do it, and it is sexist goddamn horse shit that you can have. Yes, this is about a black Afro-Latino kid. His identity is something he is proud of, he is shaped by, he lives in the game, and you get to live alongside him. The game invites you to live. No, it is important. It is, absolutely.
Yeah, and also, like, every other side character other than Peter, who's only at the very beginning and end of the game, are also either Asian or black or Hispanic. It's like the whole cast of characters, or the villain, who's a white douchebag, played very effectively by Troy Baker. It's just like, I know we've talked about, like, maybe Troy Baker's in too much stuff, but this was a very effective use of Troy Baker, like, almost like playing up that he's Troy Baker playing this character.
Oh, 100%, yeah. You're meant to know he's the bad guy the moment you hear his voice.
Yeah, this motherfucker.
No, and, one thing I think is interesting is, this game was made after Spider-Verse, but the general, like, setup for Miles in these games was done concurrently with Spider-Verse. Mm-hmm. And there's this really nice, like, weird balance they pulled off where Spider-Verse is all about Miles and his dad. And this game, because his dad is dead, is all about Miles and his mom. And I like that between the two of those, you get one about the dad and one about the mom. And I really love their presentation of his mom in this game. And she's running for city council, and she's always speaking to him in Spanish. And that's just it's just really nice. Like, she's got all of her, like this was their grandmother's apartment. Yeah. So there's a lot of that, like, heritage stuff in there. It's really cool. Just the whole cast of characters. I love the mom. I love Genki. Genki is very clearly Ned in the Marvel movies is just Genki from the comics.
Yeah.
But Genki is great. As the voice in your ear, I really enjoy Genki in this game. I love all the characters. Finn is a great villain.
With Genki, I love the ongoing, like, weird sub-narrative of he's, like, designing a mobile game.
Yes.
And, like, he doesn't want Miles to play it because it's, like, not finished yet. And, like, this, like, occasional thing that just keeps on coming up with your radio conversations, and then at the end of the game, he's finally finished it. I really enjoyed those. Like, again, as someone who spends a lot of time around teenagers and, like, We have a fairly good STEM program at the school I work at, so it's like I definitely spend some time with like teenagers who are like into that kind of shit and are like doing video game design on their own and stuff. Like there's something they're not like, I mean, like Miles and Genki are like child geniuses basically because it's a comic book world and they're going to like one of the best fake STEM schools in the world or whatever in universe. You know, like Finn is fucking designing like living matter, like metal or whatever. She's basically building a fucking T-1000 in her garage or some shit. So it's like not that level, but hearing those kinds of conversations, and there's something very like naturalistic to me. I feel like they have captured the voice of those characters in the writing, and then the performances are also like so good. It registers as nerdy teenagers talking in a way that I think a lot of video games really struggle with, because they're usually written by old white dudes. And so having like, because I know like some of the writers on this game were people like Evan Narcisse, who he's old, but he's black and he's a comic book writer and who's like written Miles in other mediums as well. So like having a more diverse cast of writers that are more experienced with some of this stuff, I think has like really helped this game capture some of the specific tone it's going for.
Absolutely. And then I think the other major character we wanted, well, actually, before we talk about Finn, there are some of the like side quest characters I really like. There's the deaf girl who Miles clearly like has a thing for. And I love every scene with her. They are utterly delightful. I love that Miles takes ALS and he knows some sign language. Or ASL, sorry, ALS. ALS is a bad thing. Yeah. ASL is a good thing. So sorry about that. But I love that there's like signing in those scenes. Those are just delightful little moments, I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the game is full of little character moments like that. Yeah, yeah.
And she gives you one of my favorite suits in the game, where she gives you the scarf, and it creates the winter outfit. And I played with that for a bunch of the game, and like even in cutscenes, it feels totally of a piece, because I 100% believe this Miles Morales would put that scarf on and web around the city with it.
Yes, yeah, because I like that it is his normal like classic Miles Morales outfit. It's just that he has like basically like a little like Santa looking hat and a scarf on, and it is, and the physics on the scarf are very good.
They're very good.
Yes.
All right, and then there's Finn, who is the big bad, but also your best friend. They did such a good job. Like when the game started out and I saw that, I felt like maybe it was going to be a little rote, but it's not. It's a really well done version of. It's a trope, but it's done so well in this game.
Yeah, and I think one thing, this is an area where the game being like shorter and more focused really helps it. Is they after that first meeting, there's a couple of things that happen that it like telegraphs pretty hard that that's the direction it's going to go in, and then it was are they going to spend like 5 hours or something of the game like teasing this out, which is like more the pacing of like the PS4 Spider-Man game. And here it's like, no, like as soon as they start telegraphing it, it's just in that whole bridge destruction scene where you find out. And they just like cut that scene obviously out of the trailers. But it was definitely, I was kind of dreading or rolling my eyes with like, oh fuck, are they going to do this? They're going to like lead us on this like wild goose chase and not just give us like the whole turn. And no, like they gave you the turn. Like that is basically the setup for the plot. They just give it to you in like the first fourth or third of the game. And I think that's one thing that helps it a lot, is it doesn't beat around the bush. It like understands this is a trope. And just leans into it, and since it knows it's a trope, it doesn't have to spend a lot of time setting it up. It just is like, no, this is the kind of story we're doing. This is the dynamic we're doing with the protagonist and antagonist, and we're jumping into it. Like, let's just go. You understand what's going on.
And because it's so streamlined, you also don't stay within one character dynamic for too long. Mm-hmm. So, like, the dynamics between them are constantly shifting and being renegotiated, and there's the part where Miles is kind of trying to go undercover, but he feels really bad about it, and then he comes out to her, and she hates him, but then they work together. Like, you're not, like, stewing in one, like, convoluted plot turn for too long. There's none of, like, I feel like in a longer version of this game, in the 30-hour version of this game, there would be some wrench in the works somewhere where you would be stuck in something that felt kind of like convoluted to just elongate the plot, and they never have to do that.
Yeah, exactly, yes. And so it does keep things fresh, because it makes like their relationship is really messy, and it gets to feel messy because it's constantly fluctuating on like what side are they on.
Yep. The ending of the game, so the entire final mission and that sequence where you're in the big tower and you are fighting her, I think the Tinkerer boss fight at the end is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, actually, that's something, that was my only big complaint about the Insomniac game, is I did not like the boss fights. I think the boss fights in this one are really good. I found them a lot better. And I thought the Tinkerer boss fight was phenomenal. Just as like a set piece, just like it is so shot through with emotion. It is such an impressive production. I have no idea how that scene runs on PS4 because it feels so crazy with all the light effects and particles, and it's nuts. And then the final cutscene where Finn you get the scene where Miles goes up and tries to drain the reactor, which I realized that is the first trailer for Miles Morales that we got at the summer, is from the very end of the game. That's amazing that they pulled that off. But then Finn flying him up, and she basically gets disintegrated. One, just visually, like, God, what a showcase for the PS5. But two, man, the way they take those characters into that emotional climax, and I feel like the follow-through they have on the big themes of the game is phenomenal.
Yeah, it is a similar thing that, like, their attitude towards the story in the first game as well. Of, they kill Aunt May at the end of that game. They're not restricting themselves, which I like that. Like, they are allowed to kill off characters because it's not an ongoing comic book series where you need to keep the Tinkerer alive because in 3 years someone might want to do like the Tinkerer Returns arc or something like that, which it was a comic book. Even if you killed her, you'd still get the Tinkerer Returns arc in 3 years, to be fair. But they just know this, like, the medium is different, so like adapting it into this medium, it's okay to kill off major characters because you're only going to get 3, 4, whatever games, maybe a couple of the spin-offs out of this franchise, and then eventually Insomniac will move on to something else. But yeah, it's just a fantastic ending that, as you say, like, it just fully goes where it needs to go with it. Gives Miles, like, his big heroic moment, his Spider-Man 2 moment. He's there without the mask, and Haley, like, hands the mask to his mom, and then his mom puts the mask on Miles.
And that's the scene I really wanted to talk about, because when he's there without the mask, and they have the mask being passed a la Spider-Man 2, and then the cops show up, and all of the Harlem... Or not the cops, but I guess it's the Troy Baker and his men, right?
No, I think it's the police.
It is the police, okay. And they show up, and, like, all of the Harlem people block the path to Spider-Man, and they say, "This is our Spider-Man." Tears. I literally was moved to tears by that. I think it is a stunningly beautiful ending of the emotionality of what Miles has lost, but what he has also gained through his heroics and being a neighbor to these people. And that they all love him. And, like, what is so important about that moment where he is unmasked is that he has done so much work for them, not as Spider-Man, that they love this kid outside of the costume, and when they see who he is inside the costume, they love him even more.
And that also,
stunningly beautiful.
Like, the whole costume is, like, basically destroyed. Like, there's, like, he's got, like, the, like, spider emblem on the chest is almost like fused into his chest, like it's like scarred there almost. And I think it's important that he's exposed because part of the thing with Spider-Man, like, one of the things that makes his design incredibly unique is that the character's costume covers him from head to toe. And so, like, part of the thing that, like, some people, like, theorize about, part of the appeal of Spider-Man, this is something that Spider-Verse leans into, is that you look at Spider-Man when he has the costume on, you can imagine anybody be wearing that costume. It's actually a point, there's, like, it's part of, like, one of the montages in the beginning of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, is they have, like, all those people talking about, like, who could he possibly be? He could be anybody. You can't know. But having that be stripped away, and it's like, it's not just anybody, it's a black kid, right? That it's not, that, like, you're so used to with Peter Parker that when the mask gets ripped off, or the like, Green Goblin throws, like, a knife at him and it, like, cuts the arm, that you can see he's white underneath. And seeing it's like, no, part of his identity is that he's also black. And that's, like, part of what makes him part of this community specifically. And having the costume be removed in some ways in that moment. Like, that just, like, I think kind of helped, like, really land that and, like, deliver that home. That's as part of as part of his identity as well. Is really powerful. I think it, like, uses the iconography of Spider-Man in a way that's incredibly powerful to me.
Absolutely. Anything else we want to say about... truly, I would put this on the pedestal with Spider-Man 2, Spider-Verse, and this are my 3 favorite Spider-Man things. And obviously I have not delved into the comics to the degree you have, Sean, so I have less experience with it. But, Spider-Man is one of my favorite characters too, and I think those three things together are like the holy trinity of Spider-Man, at least non-comics media for me.
Yeah, I would agree that for like the multimedia stuff, like this, and then like this in concert with the PS4 game, because I think they exist
Absolutely.
well, like in conversation with each other. And then again, it sets up like, man, if they follow like broadly like what I'm thinking of, and I laid out some of my harebrained scheme 2 years ago when we talked about the first game, that I'm going to say it again. I want to lay my claim. I really hope that they go here, like kill Peter at the end of the second game and make the third game Superior Spider-Man plus Miles Morales.
Yes.
And Miles be the main Spider-Man, and then like Doc Ock, crazy Peter, Superior Spider-Man comes in as well. But like, I really hope that they, because I both love the interactions that Peter and Miles have of them, that you get briefly of them being like on the same side. Like, I adore that fucking cutscene at the end of the game where Miles comes down upside down and he drinks the coffee. And Peter says, man, like, I just can't get over that costume. It's just so cool. And Miles says, you gotta be me. And Peter just sort of quietly says, yeah, you definitely do. And there's something about their interactions I love so much, but I also really want them to, over the course of the second game, bring those characters more to a head and have them be more confrontational, because I think there's like things to be resolved between those two characters, like in like almost kind of more of a meta way in looking at Spider-Man as a whole story, and then like combining that with the fucking Black Suit story and being able to do the Black Suit story, which I love, but is also one of the most overdone Spider-Man stories, because whenever you do Spider-Man, you have to eventually do the Black Suit stuff. Combining that with Miles coming into his own fully as Spider-Man and being like a second legitimate, fully accomplished Spider-Man in the city as well. Like, there's so much interesting narrative material that while I would think that right now Miles Morales is the best Spider-Man video game, and I'll just straight up say, I think I'm at the point where I think like this and the PS4 game are my favorite superhero games. Like, I love the Arkham games, but this has overtaken those.
Oh, these are better. There's no doubt these are better.
Yeah, these have overtaken those for me. I think they have set up like what could be like a truly legendary sequel in Marvel's Spider-Man. Please title it that way.
Which will also be fully ground up a PS5 game.
Yes.
Which, like, if they could do this much on a cross-gen game, Sean, I don't even want to imagine it.
Yeah.
But, man, the PS5, Sean, launching with this Demon's Souls and Astro's Playroom, that's like an unfair amount of good first-party material.
Yeah, it has been a good time, having been lucky enough to get that PlayStation 5.
It's a hell of a flex. All right. So finally today, Sean, would you like to talk a little bit about The Mandalorian on Disney Plus?
It's so good, Jonathan.
It's so good. It's fucking stupid how good it is.
Yeah.
Like, I am fully in the camp now. I will say, I just think The Mandalorian is the best thing in Star Wars since the original trilogy that I have seen. And I love the prequels. I am not a prequel hater. And I like The Last Jedi as well. But this is just better than all that, at least in live action. I have not seen enough of the animation to talk about that, although it is very clear now that The Mandalorian should probably be seen as part 3 of the Filoniverse. Clone Wars, Rebels, and then Mandalorian is part 3. Is that a fair analysis, Sean?
Like, I'll just say that, like, the deeper we get in, the more convinced I am that if, like, you turn up the volume really high and you, like, lean in really close, you can just hear Filoni cackling maniacally in the background as his crazy scheme starts coming together. Because, yeah, I would say that for me, having watched all the other Filoni stuff, like, I would say this is 100% in line with quality with, like, the best of the Clone Wars and the best of Rebels. It's, like, a slightly different kind of thing because it's live action and they're, like, so it's, like, they're not as directly comparable. But in terms of, like, the quality of achieving what it's trying to achieve and doing things with Star Wars that feel so... both, like, it's, like, appealing exactly to the core of what Star Wars is while also doing stuff with Star Wars you've never seen at the same time. It's just so effective that, yeah, like, it is definitely, after having the utter fucking disaster that was The Rise of Skywalker, having this is like, no, Star Wars can be good. It's okay. Like, that movie was shit, but Star Wars can be good, even under Disney. They can do it good, because, man... holy shit, season 2 of Mandalorian fucking rules.
It rules. So we're halfway through. We've seen 4 episodes. I will say I thought episodes 3 and 4 were weaker than 1 and 2. Yeah. I thought they were more plot heavy and mythology heavy, and so they weren't quite my flavor of like just self-contained Mandalorian stories, but they were still really good. I'm not putting them down. They're of a piece. But those first 2 episodes, Sean, are 2 of the best they've done so far between these 2 seasons. And like that first episode is, like I said with the PS5, it's such a flex. That entire first episode is such a, hell yeah, we're back, bitches. And here we're going to expand the aspect ratio. We're going to do the craziest special effects sequence in the history of television. We're going to do the entire lore backstory behind Ben Kenobi's weird call he does to distract the Sand People. Oh my god, it's been so good, Sean. I love it to death.
Yeah. So I would say for me, episode 1 of season 2 is the best episode they've done. Like, I think actually kind of easily. Like, there's a bunch of episodes that have been amazing, but that one to me is like I just remember being so fucking energized coming off of that episode. And just being like, oh my god. And it sneaking up on me because it was like, you know, that came out the day before Halloween, and like shit was just crazy because shit is crazy in the world in 2020. And then all of a sudden it being like, oh wait, oh my god, like season 2 of The Mandalorian has started, and sitting down and booting that up and being like, oh, time to redo my Disney Plus subscription and watch this shit. And it is, yeah, season 2 episode 1 in particular is just fucking amazing. Top down, with like one, I just have to shout out some of the best guest star anything I've ever seen in a TV show, which is getting Timothy Olyphant to saunter into a fucking cantina in Star Wars and just be fucking Space Raylan Givens from Justified. And that whole scene, and he's wearing Boba Fett's motherfucking armor. And that, I think that was the thing that like I was just so bolstered by seeing this. Like this, yes, like Dave Filoni is definitely like here. His hand is on the wheel with this, along with Jon Favreau, because I don't think I could trust anybody with like properly doing a Boba Fett thing in Star Wars other than Dave Filoni, because you have to. It's such a tight needle you have to thread with trying to do Boba Fett stuff in modern Star Wars, because you both have to try to satisfy the people who are crazy and who are like obsessed with Boba Fett, even though he's like a fairly minor character that just has cool looking armor, and the armor is like the legacy of Boba Fett. Is why the Mandalorian exists, is because the fucking Boba Fett armor was cool. And it's like, it's fine, but those people are like insane and they just go crazy for anything Boba Fett related. So you have to satisfy those people. You also have to satisfy sane people like myself, and I assume you're kind of in this camp as well, Jonathan. It's like, Boba Fett's cool. Like, I like him. He's cool in Empire Strikes Back. I find it very funny that he just gets, like, fucking knocked out immediately at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, and I cackle every time that happens because it's funnier every time I watch that movie and think about how popular that character is, and he just gets fucking taken out like a bitch immediately, and it's great. But I don't have like I need Boba Fett to be in Star Wars, or Star Wars is just not cool anymore or something. So it's like you have to satisfy the Boba Fett fanatics and the skeptics. And I think doing this whole thing where you have Timothy Olyphant saunter in and he's wearing Boba Fett's armor, and this whole story about where they got the armor, and the vague hints of like that the Krayt Dragon killed the Sarlacc pit, which is probably how like you can kind of justify Boba Fett escapes. And all this stuff, and you thinking that eventually this is going to be the Boba Fett episode, and it never really is. And then at the very, very end, you get this one shot of fucking Tamora Morrison, the guy who played Jango in the prequels, who, you know, Boba Fett is a clone of. And he's standing in the desert with like this crazy fucking nomad motherfucker, because they had announced beforehand that he was cast in the series. And they don't technically credit him in the end of the episode as Boba, but obviously he's Boba. And I don't even know if they need to actually have him be there. I would be really fascinated to see how Tamora Morrison would play the character and how they'd write him. But also, if that's the only thing we see of Boba Fett, I would honestly be happy, because I think they nailed the like what is interesting about that character, which is his armor, and then like suggesting that there's like something else that could happen with him. I was just so taken aback as a Star Wars fan about it is the best thing I've ever seen using Boba Fett, and they don't even really use him since Empire Strikes Back, basically.
No, you're 100% right. And, like, I am very much on the Boba Fett skeptic side, where, like, I don't know if I even was that into the... Like, I think the armor's cool, but I was never in the, like, Boba Fett's that interesting a character. I find, like, the Mandalorian in The Mandalorian a much more cool, interesting character. I even think the design of his armor is better than the Boba Fett design. But, like, it is such a canny choice to have our Boba Fett episode is really about the armor, because Boba Fett was always about the armor. That's all that he was. And so what you do is you have Timothy Olyphant, who, this show has such a good sense of iconography. Because so much of what this show is iconography. Mm-hmm. It is a dude with a cool mask. It is a cute little baby puppet Yoda. It is like iconography up and down. And Timothy Olyphant is the closest we have in America to a like Western action hero still, right? Like he is the 2000s John Wayne or something, or without the racism. Yeah, Clint Eastwood is probably an even better comparison, like, because he has been, and he has a legitimate claim to this because he is a Western star in Justified and in Deadwood. Yeah. And I think he is someone who like justifiably feels like he is from that world, and so you have him saunter in, and as you say, Sean, you realize it's Tim Olyphant before he even takes the mask off, and that's part of the joy of it. But the idea of it being Tim Olyphant wearing the Boba Fett armor, and like, he's a good dude. He's not like, he's using it because he kind of needs to, and he and the Mandalorian decide to work together, and he'll hand the armor over at the end of the episode, and then you get the Mandalorian having an adventure with Tim Olyphant and Boba Fett armor. I mean, you can just hear Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni high-fiving in the background because that is such a slam dunk of an idea. And again, this show is so canny about how it deploys iconography in a way most Star Wars stuff is not. Like, Star Wars, the Star Wars sequel trilogy is so reverent for nostalgia, but it has no sense of how to deploy the iconography of Star Wars in the way I think this movie does, or this show does. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. And then also like finding spaces of Star Wars to like, and this is like part of like that Dave Filoni sensation of it, of like, you can both find things that like people who are fans of Star Wars are going to like think, this is a bad idea, or you can never do this, and you like nail it, or people who have never watched Star Wars are only casual fans, and you can excite them without confusing them. It's like, I think the biggest example of that with Filoni is Darth Maul in Clone Wars, a thing that like, I still can't believe that they fucking did, and they pulled it off, and it's like one of the best things about that show and Rebels is they brought Darth Maul back, and it's just like so well done. But that is all over here in The Mandalorian, and you see it particularly in season 2 as they're like digging even harder in, because it feels like Dave Filoni was like dipping his toes in with Mandalorian season 1, seeing is like, will this work? Can we break out of like the cartoon realm and go into live action and with like a very different audience that is way more sort of like normie or whatever, and like just kind of normal people who like Star Wars but are never going to watch a cartoon because they're boring people. And so we can make this like live action TV show for them. And the first season, it's like, you got a little bit of it, you got a Baby Yoda, whatever. And then now it's like you go out fucking swinging. Season 2, episode 1, you have Boba Fett, people talking about fucking Sarlacc pits, and then they have an entire action sequence at the end around fucking crate dragons, a thing that exists entirely because of one line of dialogue, as you identified from Star Wars Episode 4, where that's like the weird noise that Obi-Wan Kenobi makes to scare the sand people away. That is also like, this is Dave Filoni was here involved with this. I don't know if Jon Favreau plays video games or not. The entire ending of this is basically, what if Monster Hunter did the end of the Tatooine questline from Knights of the Old Republic that ends with you teaming up with an encampment of sand people to try to lure out a crate dragon and then kill it with bombs. In that instance, use it on banthas. But it's like, it is like so eerily similar to that ending quest, the like streamlined from KOTOR, but with like the production values and the ridiculousness of you fighting a fucking Rathalos or something in Monster Hunter. It just like captures the fantasy of fighting a monster in Star Wars so perfectly. And then it has the added touch of doing like the smoothest fucking aspect ratio, like mid-sequence aspect ratio shift I've ever seen. That when it happened in like, because I didn't even notice it in the moment. I wasn't like conscious that the screen had slowly filled out to a full 16:9 until like 5 seconds after it happened. I was like, wait a minute, what the fuck? This was not full 16:9. This is like cinematic widescreen. And then I backed up and watched that scene again and was like, oh my God, Jonathan's gonna flip his shit out when he fucking watches this, because it's so smooth. It's like, obviously this is not a thing that is like shot on IMAX, but it is like when Christopher Nolan does his movies and he like has like, here's like the 2 scenes that were shot on IMAX, but those don't like, some of those are like kind of interesting, But even that, like,
Well,
the transition doesn't feel like artful in that way. Here
No,
it feels so
well, so here's the
artistically
thing.
motivated.
So here's the thing: when Chris Nolan does it, he does not actually do transitions at all. It's just hard cuts, and in fact, and it's more than 2 scenes. I mean, Dark Knight, it's 25 minutes. Dark Knight Rises, it was 70 minutes. Interstellar is like half and half, and then now he just shoots entirely on IMAX and 70 and mixes them. But what he does is, like, sequences will be built around IMAX, but some stuff in those scenes still have to be shot on 35 for practical reasons. So it's just a lot of shifting between shots, and there's no transition. It's just hard cuts, and I think that can be in the theater, in the IMAX theater. I think it works great. On home video, it's a little more jarring because those cuts are just much more obvious. But what they do here with The Mandalorian, it's not just the smoothness of that, but like the way they've re-articulated the entire shooting style of the show for that sequence. Because we've never really seen Star Wars in live action in 16:9. It has always been a CinemaScope production. It has always been an anamorphic widescreen thing. And Mandalorian gets the codes of that cinematography very well. And in this scene, it moves to, large format photography. And you can tell the camera they're using is different, because when you're shifting aspect ratio, you are by definition using at the very least a different lens and probably a different camera. And that's very clear to me that it's a different camera. I could be wrong, but it looks like a different camera to me. And it looks like it might even be like an IMAX digital camera because it is so crystal clear. And so you have this clarity, and suddenly, for this one scene, Star Wars is not about horizontality, it's about verticality. And Star Wars is never conceptually on the on the compositional level about verticality. It's always the horizontal line in this very Kurosawa-esque fashion. And here they're like, no, we're going for the verticality of fighting this giant monster. And I think that sequence altogether is maybe the best non-lightsaber action sequence in all of Star Wars. The only competition would be Hoth, and I think this might even be, I know this is fucking sacrilege to say, but that scene might have jazzed me even more than Hoth. It is an incredible action sequence, and this was Jon Favreau's debut directing on this show.
Yeah.
He did not direct in season 1, so this is the first thing he has directed for Star Wars. He's written a shit ton of Star Wars at this point, and the man should direct more Star Wars. He's very good at it.
Yeah, it was honestly, the thing that moment reminded me of more than anything, obviously partially because I just rewatched it very recently, but it was a very Samurai Jack-esque thing to do, because Samurai Jack plays with, aspect ratio constantly, and it'll have little picture-in-picture and panels, but there are whole episodes of Samurai Jack wherein I changed the settings on my TV to zoom in so that it filled, because it was effectively a cinematic widescreen image that was contained in a 4x3 box, because they didn't give a shit. So, but now when you own it on home video, you're like, oh, I can just actually have this fill out the whole width of my TV, and it looks fucking great because it's on Blu-ray. And it had that attitude of just being almost nothing ever does this. Movies live action stuff is almost always just shot in whatever its aspect ratio it is, and it never changes. And this one is nah, fuck that shit. Let's do something fucking cool. And they did something really cool. I'm obviously somewhat biased because it's around a giant monster, but I kind of agree that I think this might be my favorite spectacle-focused action scene that's not a duel or something in Star Wars. It is mind-blowing, and it is a throwing down of the gauntlet of saying, hey, we were testing it with the first season, and obviously the first season was very expensive, but they didn't have anything that was quite like this in terms of the special effects. We're just going to do the special effects around the Crate Dragon, and this is going to continue for the spider monsters in episode 2, are more impressive than most big budget Hollywood movies. It is, and some of that I think is that they have the time and money to do it, because they have the confidence in the product now to lean into it that hard. But it's also that Jon Favreau, and then for episode 2, Peyton Reed, who's the director from the Ant-Man movies, these are directors who know how to shoot with special effects and have a lot of experience with Marvel movies and shit like that, shooting for huge, ridiculous spectacle effects, and they know how to put that together in a way to get the most bang for your buck. And it is truly, I think, jaw-dropping when they fully pull out all the stops in these episodes.
And episode 3 and 4 are huge showcases. I think it's better special effects than in any of the sequel trilogy movies.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll get to that. I want to say one more thing on the aspect ratio, because I think you correctly identified, it feels much more like an animation style aspect ratio shift where you're doing it for the shape. And the aspect ratio shifts people are familiar with now are much more like the Chris Nolan IMAX thing, where the shift happens because of the shooting format, not because Chris Nolan wants to shoot in a square. It's just because IMAX is a square image. Like some people pointed out on Twitter when I tweeted about that aspect ratio shift, and they said Mission Impossible Fallout does this really well too. And I'm like, I didn't even know that had a shift, and I went and looked on the Blu-ray because I had the Blu-ray, but I hadn't watched it yet. And that movie does have 2 scenes shot in IMAX, and it does the like raise up, which Mission Impossible 4 did for its IMAX scene as well. But when I saw Fallout in theaters, I saw it in a non-IMAX screen, so the ratio didn't shift. It was just 2:35:1. And that's the key thing, is that's a difference of shooting format, but it is still essentially shot for 2:35:1. Like The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises were still shown in normal widescreen theaters. It's made to be cropped. It's not about the aspect ratio. It's not about the shape. It's about the shooting format. What they do in The Mandalorian that makes it so effective is it's about the shape. They want to go to a different shape. It's not they wanted to use a different stock or camera. They probably did, but they did that to achieve the shape, not the other way around, and I think that's really significant. And then, yeah, the special effects across all 4 of these episodes, they're not just good because of the time and money, they're good because I feel like they are executed with a sense of purpose and clarity, and like you can feel the storyboarding going on. Mm-hmm. Like clearly these were just very intricately planned in a way that a lot of Hollywood movies, and we know this about Rise of Skywalker because that was a shit production, they're so rushed and they're so like big and unwieldy, it's almost impossible to do effect sequences this good because there's not enough like vision to it. And there is so much vision to the effect sequences in this. And as you say, episode 2 is just, it's a creature feature.
Yep.
It's like a B movie from the 50s, but with modern effects. And I part of me likes episode 2 even more because it is so creepy and gnarly and it's so intense. But both of them, I mean, I think episodes 1 and 2 are 2 of the best they've done. It's so good.
Yeah, and so talking about episode 2, it definitely has, yes, like it is that creature feature element. It's got so much good little like touches. Like I love fucking Mando getting pulled over by the New Republic in space at the beginning. And that's like kind of the start of it. Is like the New Republic are, and it's something that continues in the last episode 4, as you get a little bit more of this. It's with like the Western sort of style and genre conventions they're doing. It very much feels like you're watching something like Once Upon a Time in the West, and the New Republic is the American government coming out further west, and it's like, or like Red Dead Redemption 2 and 1 are both obviously other really good reference points for the same kind of trope of where you have the government man who's out here now and the law trying to like tame the Wild West or whatever. It's a lot of that kind of trope. But there's something so fresh about it in a Star Wars context, and having it specifically be the New Republic and feeling like the New Republic is this thing you're supposed to just automatically be like, yeah, they're the good guys because they're the side that Luke was on, and Luke and all those guys, they built the New Republic by defeating the Empire. But for people living out in the Outer Rim, they don't give a shit because it's like, it's whatever the government is in the core worlds has like very little bearing on what they're doing out here now that the Empire has fallen. So all that stuff I find really, really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that element of it. I also like that they just decide to let Mando go at the end because he's done all these good things for them. Those are funny characters. But I love the entire narrative setup of episode 2 of that, okay, to get to this information, you're going to have to take this mom and her eggs over here. And then it's just this giant wrench gets thrown in the works because, of course, no Mandalorian job is ever simple. And I love basically episode 2 has, other than the New Republic cops, no human faces in it. You're only seeing Mando through the mask, Baby Yoda, and weird Jim Henson puppet lady, because she totally looks like a Jim Henson puppet from like the Dark Crystal or Labyrinth, and I love that. It's so cool. And this is also the episode where Baby Yoda becomes a murderer and starts eating those eggs, which has disturbed the entire internet.
Yeah, they are unfertilized eggs. So it's like
it's okay,
you eating sushi or something, or caviar. Yeah, it's like I do that because I think that I appreciate the dark humor of it. I definitely get why some people are maybe turned off from it because it is like a little intense, but it is. I found it very funny. And I think it's like
great.
Continuing on from a general theme that you got like very vaguely is that maybe baby Yoda being raised by the Mandalorian is not the best education for him, and he's gonna have to deal with like him seeing people get fucking blasted all the time. Because I think there's just like a certain like amorality to Baby Yoda that is partially because he's a baby, and then also maybe partially because that's like the world that the Mandalorian lives in, and so he's not necessarily getting this like very wholesome like upbringing or whatever.
They're leaning into the lone wolf and cub of it all.
Yes.
Let's say. But anyway, no, that second episode, all of like the set design and all the spider creatures and like the webbed, like when all the the sequence where they're all running from the spiders and then they all are like flying into the ship and then they have to like get up to the front and like lock the door. It's so good. And I just love that he has to take off in that ship and just like let everything in the back get sucked out into the vacuum of space. Yes. Oh God, it's so cool. It's actually like this show I feel like deals with like some of the like, as far as you can in Star Wars, some of the like the science of the science fiction in here a little more. And it's really fun when they do that. Because mostly Star Wars is fantasy, but sometimes you get a little bit of the physics of it that are very funny.
Yeah, that moment of where they're just like, well, we just got to pressurize the cockpit and hope it works, and we're just going to go. I adored that. Yeah, and there's something about like seeing at the end of the episode, it saying directed by Peyton Reed, again, as the director of the Ant-Man movies. It was like, of course, that makes like, of course, like you get a guy because, you know, the Ant-Man movies are not the most impressive narratively movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they have some of I think, the most interesting, like, special effects work. And there's something about, like, if you get a dude who knows how to direct for special effects and, like, everything about the lighting conditions in that cave that's, like, very sort of, like, sharp, direct lighting that's mostly very dark. It's got a, like, Jurassic Park-esque thing it's doing to, like, make the creatures sit in that world really naturally. It just feels like they're getting really good people to get like the exact thing that they want to get for the stories that they're telling, and I think that you really see that in episode 2.
But also, like, this is better than anything I've seen Peyton Reed direct. Yeah. I think the Ant-Man movies are really well directed. Particularly the second one has some really fun stuff. But like, I thought this was a level beyond that. That first episode, that is the best effects work Jon Favreau's ever done. Like, Iron Man 1 and 2 have just terrible fight scenes. The action in Iron Man 1 and 2 is awful and inept, and then you get to Mandalorian episode 1 and it's phenomenal. Like, Jon Favreau has clearly grown as a filmmaker in that dimension. It's really cool. And like episode 3 was Bryce Dallas Howard again, and I thought that was a big step up from her directing in season 1. So it's always cool when you see directors like improve their craft, you know?
Yeah. Although I do think, like, while it is definitely, I think, better than her episode in season 1, it is like clear that's like, okay, they're episode 3 and 4 are like just not quite as good as episodes 1 and 2. But they are still.
But I think
good.
That's a scripting thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think the production is great. It's not that the scripts are bad. It's that these 2 episodes, by necessity, are doing more like plot and mythology stuff, and I like that in The Mandalorian because I think it's cool plot and mythology they're doing, but it makes the individual episodes less satisfying, even though I think the core of both of them, like the heist on the ship in episode 3 and then the storming of the base in episode 4 and the entire adventure with Carl Weathers and Gina Carano, is extremely fun, especially in episode 4. Episode 4 is very good. Yeah. It's just not as satisfying as those extremely self-contained, purely kinetic, almost like George Miller-esque Mad Max stuff you get in those first 2 episodes.
Yeah, so although I'm very excited to see, because I think we all know what episode 5 is going to be, but then I'm hoping that 6 and especially 7, which I believe is the one that's Rick Famuyiwa is coming back to direct. I'm hoping we get some good. I want some more Monster of the Week stuff mixed in with these more plot focused episodes. But this is where, with episodes 3 and 4, this is where you most get Dave Filoni's master plan is coming together, because it is like, when you think about the fact that I think it was 2008 is when the Clone Wars started airing. Think back then, Dave Filoni cast Jon Favreau as Pre Vizsla, a Mandalorian character in that, just to play the voice, which is not what Jon Favreau is known for. He's a director. Like, he obviously acts in his stuff as well. He's very good as Happy in the Marvel movies, but you know, Jon Favreau's a fucking film director. And so it was always just like, it's a weird casting. I don't know. Maybe Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are like friends beforehand or something. And then he also cast Kitty Sackhoff to play a character named Bo-Katan, who's Pre Vizsla's like second in command, basically. who starts out a fairly minor role early on in Clone Wars that grows pretty significantly as a role to where she's a pretty major character in season 3 of Rebels, and then she's also a major character in season 7, the last like a new season of Clone Wars in the Ahsoka storyline. And so they cast Katie Sackhoff, probably best known as playing Starbuck in the new, like the remake of Battlestar Galactica. And they kind of vaguely model the character off of the actress. And so then you watch episode 3, and I'm pretty sure that it had gotten out that like they had cast Katie Sackhoff to probably play Bo-Katan, but I had forgotten that. And there's that moment where she fucking flies down in the Mandalorian armor that is like very identifiably Bo-Katan's Mandalorian armor. And the voice comes out of it. And introducing it specifically that way, and then she takes the helmet off. And it is such a fucking mindfuck as a moment, because if you are a fan of Clone Wars, and all that, and you know who this character is, it is like mind-bending to see that character just exist exactly as she is, but in live action, because it's the same actress. She's like playing the character, like she gets like all the physicality, because they model some of like the animators use reference for the actors when they animated the characters in the show. So it's like the physicality, the voice, the armor, like the hair, like all like the look of the character is the fucking character from Clone Wars just in live action. And then also I like that they pair that moment with a big reveal for Mandalorian, for Mando, that he has now encountered Mandalorians that are not from his tribe or his group for the first time, and it merges the continuities together by like explicitly stating what I had suspected, which is that the Mando that we know is from some weird sort of like splinter group who has actually no fucking clue what the Mandalorians are like, because he's never been to Mandalore. He's never met other Mandalorians other than the ones that have raised him. And so combining this moment, this huge reveal for fans, with this big narrative reveal for the main characters, so that even if you don't know any of that other shit, it still is going to play as a reveal. It's so well put together, and it did make my mind fucking explode when it's just, here's this animated character that exists like perfectly in live action, which I have never seen. I don't think anything has ever done it that way, of taking an animated character with a specific actress and years later convert it into a live action character and just do it perfectly. Like, it is fucking crazy.
But if that was crazy, Sean,
yeah,
what about when Bo-Katan says the words, "Go see Ahsoka Tano"?
Yeah. No, it's...
How... Did you faint? Did you wake up like hours later and like someone in your house had like carried you into bed and put like a fucking like hot towel on your head to like cool you off?
I mean, I just started cackling along with Dave Filoni, because it's just like, how the fuck does this dude done this? Like, how is he going to make like millions of people who have no experience or knowledge of any of this stuff are now like watching part 3 of his Star Wars story, like, basically.
Yes.
It's so crazy to me that this is somehow where we are with this TV show, is that fucking... And it's almost certainly going to be the next episode, because the next episode is written and directed by Dave Filoni. It's the only, like, obviously he's like working on and doing like work on the other episodes as well. But it's like that's his episode, is the next episode. And he's the Ahsoka guy, so clearly it's going to be that episode that they put her in. It's just, how the fuck, you fucking madman, how is this happening?
It's insane. I mean, it does speak to how big Ahsoka has gotten as a character, that Disney would also just feel seemingly perfectly comfortable putting her in live action.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like Miles Morales, what we were talking about, of like Miles feeling like this big new character who's become just part of the mainstream consciousness of Spider-Man. And I feel like Ahsoka Tano is moving into that realm with Star Wars, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this is like the last step of now pushing her fully into live action, which is what the average person expects from Star Wars. So it's what they're going to go to Star Wars for, is some live action thing. And now finally having Ahsoka Tano, which I believe it was confirmed that it was Rosario Dawson, right?
Yes. I just looked it up, and it will be Rosario Dawson. So this is a little different, because obviously, like, Ashley Eckstein couldn't just play her in live action. It would be a little weird, right?
Yeah, because the character is like way older now, and then and also like the character is not modeled off of Ashley Eckstein. But Rosario Dawson is extremely good casting. Like I could not come up with better casting to play an adult Ahsoka Tano.
Like, we haven't seen any pictures of her yet, but I can just imagine the makeup on her. Like, she's got the right body for it. and like the right face structure, it's like it's not hard to imagine. And because it's a much older Ahsoka Tano, she will have room to reinterpret the character a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and obviously the fact that it's Dave Filoni that's doing it, like, gives me all the confidence in the writing, and like he understands the character to work with Rosario Dawson. And like Rosario Dawson is like an actress I fucking adore. So
she's great.
Yeah, so I'm extremely excited to see that performance and like to see what they do with that character, because there's like it's incredibly exciting to see an animated character just sort of exist in live action and to just destroy your entire frame of reference of what like reality looks like. But it's also extremely exciting to see a different actress be able to sort of like tackle an older and like different version of this character that we all love. So that is something
absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to.
I mean, Sean, this time next week, we will have seen Ahsoka Tano in live action. That's a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And you know what's especially crazy is Mandalorian Season 2 went into production as Season 1 was airing. It was ordered ahead of time. All of this budget stuff, none of this is because the show was a hit. They didn't know when this was made. Like, this is the reason why we have this despite COVID, is that they finished filming before COVID happened. That's how far in advance they were. But they basically ordered 2 seasons at once. And so I have to imagine that like the increase in budget and all this other stuff is just because the Disney people were seeing those episodes that we saw last year and going, holy shit, this is really good. And I think it's a reminder that like sometimes quality just speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. And that I think if you were a Disney exec sitting in a screening room watching the first season of Mandalorian, you could feel we have a hit on our hands. No doubt this is going to be a cultural moment. Like, the moment you see Baby Yoda, you're going to know that, but even beyond Baby Yoda. Like, so, like, really the question is, what is Season 3 going to look like? Which will be the first one ordered and produced in a post-Mandalorian is a public thing world. Mm-hmm. You know? Like, do they get more episodes? Do they branch out more? Are they going to do spin-offs? They've talked about doing, like, a spin-off with the Gina Carano character. Not sure that's going to happen. She's been a little controversial on Twitter. Yeah. So, although I do like her in the show. She was, I thought, good in episode 4 again. Loved seeing Carl Weathers again. Carl Weathers can just be in anything. I will watch him read the phone book. He was so fun in that last episode, Sean.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And him getting to direct it also is very cool. Like, I was very
cool.
It put a big smile on my face when I saw that credit come up at the end. And then episode 4 has some of the best Baby Yoda shit. That whole scene in the like, just everything about Carl Weathers walking into a school being taught by a C-3PO style protocol droid and fucking putting a little Baby Yoda puppet down into a like little school seat, and then Baby Yoda looking over and stealing this kid's fucking like blue macaroon or whatever the fuck that like cookie thing was, using the Force. And that's the first time he's used the Force this whole season so far, is just to steal a fucking cookie, basically, which is very, very, very good.
And then him throwing up at the end of the episode, and Mando like taking his thing and like he's his fucking like dad at like a brunch or something, and like getting the spittle away. It's so funny. It's so funny.
I mean, that's where like one thing that's like really cool about this season is I do feel like it's, you know, like Mandalorian is not a show that is like about heavy character development stuff. Like it's at its heart a Monster of the Week show with some like larger plot stuff in it. But it is cool to see Mando in this season and his relationship with Baby Yoda and how like comfortable they are. And you see that so much in episode 4 specifically with like, you know, that great opening gag of him trying to tell Baby Yoda how to like fix the thing and put the red wire where the blue wire was, blue wire where the red wire was. And Baby Yoda's like, I'm a baby. What are you even talking about? Like that, like the humor, which is there in season 1, but I feel like it's even more effective here in season 2 because we know the characters so well and they're more comfortable, like both playing and writing the characters. That stuff has just been such a joy to watch.
So good. This is just one of the best shows on TV, one of the best shows of the streaming era. Mm-hmm. And I am very excited to... I don't know if we're going to go weekly, but we'll definitely check back in, at least at the end of the season, because I'm sure the second half will be even more exciting, especially if we have a world where Ahsoka Tano is now in live action.
Yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about whether or not they're going to do the classic superhero team-up thing, where when Mando meets Ahsoka, they have to fight, and just imagining Ahsoka kick
you're so
the
right.
shit out of the Mandalorian. He would, like, this is a lady who fought Darth Vader to a standstill in season 2 of Rebels. He would get his fucking ass kicked. I really hope that that's what happens in the next episode, because I really want to see him just get his shit kicked in by fucking Ahsoka Tano. Would be great.
I have a feeling, Sean, Dave Filoni thinks a lot like you do
Yeah.
about these things. So we're going to see. All right, we'll be back next week. We'll be talking... Sean, I actually wanted to ask you if you want to do this next week. Would you like next week to do... we finally have, I feel like, a free moment. Do you want to do our next Batman episode?
Yeah, I've bought those fucking 4K Blu-rays, so let's jump into some Batman.
All right, so if you're playing along, watch Batman 1989, the Tim Burton movie with Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton. We did Batman Part 1 last month, where we talked about the 66 movie. Now we're moving into the real modern era of Batman on film. And I'm excited to watch this one. So let's say that'll be next week's big topic, and whatever else comes up, comes up. So we'll see you next week. Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe out there. And I hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving, as good as it can be during these trying times.
I just want to thank Dave Filoni for giving us all the best Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving gifts aren't a thing. They are this year. Thank you, Dave Filoni. I'm thankful for you.